I grew up out in the country. Chickamauga, Georgia is about 10 miles outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee. It's a little small country town.
From the youngest age, family is everything to Wilda Gadd.
My grandfather owns several acres, so we grew up with more family for neighbors than anything else, and we were able to roam the streets and woods and fields without any harm to come to us.
Wilda is my sister. We had a pretty much normal childhood as far as getting out playing and grandparents down the street.
Reality changed. Our marriage ended in '88, and around that time, me and my kids returned to Chickamauga. When we did get back to Georgia, we were all kind of hanging out at my grandparents' house, and Sam was there.
Sam was Mom's brother. He's probably our favorite uncle. We always stood outside peeking out to see when Sam was coming, you know, up the drive. It was like Santa Claus coming.
Sam Thomas had been at all the family dinners with his wife Betty and stepson Howard when Wilda and Regina were growing up.
About the time I was in middle school, I learned that Sam and Betty had split up. To me as a kid, it was shocking to find out that her and Howard were no longer going to be part of our family.
And now, it's like old times when Howard returns to visit as an adult.
Wilda, she thought he was charming. She thought he was handsome.
He seemed to be a fun-loving guy. He was always laughing and cutting up.
Like Wilda, Howard is navigating the new challenges of being a single parent.
Howard had a child that he was taking care of by himself, Kelly.
She was 4 or 5 years old. She was Howard's daughter by his first wife, Debbie Weiniger.
This is just what I know of the story. Debbie ran off and left and abandoned the child.
You know, it was just a heartbreaking situation. The love of his life just walked off and left him for no reason, don't know whether she's dead or alive, and now he's got a child that he doesn't know how to explain what's happened to her mom. One of the things that really attracted me to Howard was the fact he wanted to be a family man.
Howard was such a loving, kind, gentle person, and knowing that Sam helped raise him, I think she felt safe.
Wilda and her kids are about to head off on a Disneyland vacation. The timing couldn't be better.
Kelly was having such a good time with my kids that I was approached by Howard and Sam about maybe her going with me to Disney. We took her with us. Watching Kelly interact with my kids, you wouldn't have known that they were not true brother and sister. Once our visit was over at Disney, Howard's intentions originally was to come out there and he was going to take Kelly back to Chattanooga with him. But she kind of clung to me and got attached to me. I wanted to take her and, you know, kind of be that step in for her as long as I could.
The next step seems only logical to Howard and Wilda. Join forces as two single parents, raising their children together.
All of us, Howard, Kelly, my kids, we all moved in together. And so me and Howard, you know, we started more as friends. I don't exactly remember the moment it became romantic. We just kind of gravitated towards each other. I knew with my uncles, you know, helping upbring him that he was a decent guy. It just kind of blossomed. It was what I wanted.
They just seemed to bond real quickly. It seemed to go real fast.
He was very cuddly. No matter where you were at, you know, he made you feel loved and wanted. It seemed like he was the perfect person to fit in with the family and wanted to be with that family.
But there are those who would break this happy family up, and they've got lawyers.
I was beginning to learn more about Howard's custody battle at the time. The court battle started after Debbie disappeared. Her sister and her mother filed for custody of Kelly. Howard got Debbie pregnant when she was married to someone else. So with Howard not having his name on Kelly's birth certificate, he was not considered her legitimate father. Their view was Howard was the bad guy. Howard broke up the marriage. The judge pretty much made the decision to remove Kelly from Howard's custody without ever hearing Howard's side of the story. Our whole family, felt for Howard and felt that he was being done wrong by the justice system in Bradley County.
Wilda doesn't have the knowledge or training to take on a court battle, at least not yet.
The law always interested me, so I returned to junior college to study paralegal.
She was always smiling and happy and going along. But there was a lot of rumors. I had heard rumors that Howard had killed Debbie Winiger and buried her in the basement. And then I had heard other rumors that he had killed her and hauled her off because supposedly there's no way she would have walked off and left that child. So I don't know.
The rumors had started when Debbie Winiger went missing in the fall of '87, just a few months before Wilda and Howard re-met.
Debbie's family reported her missing in fall of 1987. When they tried to talk with her, and she was never available to talk. You haven't talked to your sister in over a month because she's been sick or a headache or couldn't come to the phone. They got highly suspicious, and that's when Howard told them that she had left. And so Debbie's family felt like he had done something with her.
He had filed to get divorced from Debbie, and it stayed hung up in courts because she was still considered a missing person, and he was listed as a person of interest. I felt really bad for Howard because from the side that I was hearing, he was totally in the right.
After months of researching legal options, Wilda and Howard are able to put the malicious rumors to rest when Debbie supposedly shows up at Howard's lawyer's office.
His receptionist said the girl looked like Debbie, brought the papers in here and says, "Here, I'm signed them, I want a divorce." And there was also a document signed giving Howard the custody of Kelly.
It's hard to imagine a happier ending to all Wilda's worries.
That sounded great to me. Debbie's back, his supposedly dead ex-wife. Here she is, she showed up, she's alive, she's not dead.
The fact is, it's only the beginning of Wilda's nightmare. The worst is yet to come.
It's just sometimes just a gut feeling you get about a person, something's not right.
It become a mission in my mind to solve this case. And I wish that I could have, because 3 people would still be alive today.
Wilda Gadd and Howard Hawk Willis are thrilled to learn that Howard's wife has reappeared at Howard's lawyer's office, just long enough to serve divorce papers. Debbie looks to be alive and well, despite all of her family's unproven accusations.
It was a relief. Legal battles would be over.
But Howard's lawyer is not so certain.
The lawyer asked about it because the signature didn't match him they had on file. The lawyer questioned it being true. He made the comment that maybe someone had come in there portraying to be Debbie. He wasn't going to put a document that he was sure was falsified in courts. Of course, Howard denied knowing anything about it to the lawyer. I asked Howard what he knew. Finally, Howard admitted he had someone dress up like Debbie and take the divorce papers to Willis Jackson's office. So he knew in Oklahoma who matched her description, who was willing to go in there and portray to be Debbie so he could get his divorce without any more issues. Knowing that he was willing to have someone impersonate his ex-wife kind of was off-nerving. It kind of throws up red flags, but he smooths it out. He was so charming and smooth talking, you didn't want to think he was wrong. I really wanted to believe that Howard was 100% truthful.
Once Howard is caught in one lie, everything starts unraveling. After Debbie went missing 2 years earlier, custody of her and Howard's daughter had been granted to Debbie's family, not to Howard.
I honestly didn't know that Howard had lost custody, but apparently didn't have custody, and he was wanted for kidnapping. I learned Howard was arrested for federal kidnapping actually on the news.
Wilda and Sam come to Howard's rescue.
He walked in the courtroom, we signed bond papers and walked back out. But in the meantime, Kelly was placed in the custody of her aunt, Gertrude Lark. At the time, to realize a grandmother and an aunt would want to take the child away from her only parent that she knew was horrifying. Kelly is in Virginia, away from the one person that was her solid support for all the years.
It's the beginning of a long, dark chapter for Howard and Wilda. But during that time, they do get a little good news.
Finally, Howard was granted a divorce from Debbie on irreconcilable differences and abandonment.
Howard is once again an eligible bachelor.
We just, on the spur of the moment, walked into a judge's chamber and got married.
You can really see what Wilda saw in him, a charming, handsome man who loved children. He loved her. He was good to her.
We went out and had a nice dinner. We spent one night away, and then we returned home. Being husband and wife, it kind of gave me some relief knowing that, we still had our relationship no matter what happened.
There is still one downside to Wilda's married life, and that's Howard's mother, Betty, who takes a strong dislike to her new daughter-in-law because she is the niece of her ex-husband, Sam.
Betty, his mother, always hated me. She didn't want me around, so there was always a conflict of struggle there.
Betty Willis did threaten her daughter-in-law, Wilda, several times. She threatened to shoot her with a long gun at some point. She definitely threatened to cut her up into pieces.
We like to call her crazy, but she was evil. It's not just me. She was against Howard being involved with anybody other than doing what she wanted when she wanted to.
Wilda and Howard never stopped their fight to win Kelly back. And finally, Wilda's ongoing law studies pay off when she files charges against the judge in Howard's custody case.
The judge admitted to having ex parte hearings, which means he was meeting one-on-one with a lawyer, not with the whole group of lawyers and making decisions. And they forced him to recuse himself from Howard's case.
And after 2 long years of legal battles, a DNA test yields a breakthrough. It proves with 99% certainty Howard is Kelly's natural father.
So Howard was able to regain custody of Kelly because we were able to get him recognized as her father. That was one of the best victories we honestly had against Bradley County courts. By then the kids were almost middle school. We were given custody of Kelly the first part of December, and we drove to Virginia to pick her up on Christmas Eve and bring her home. Sam was with us. It made for a great Christmas. It was like a dream come true. I finally had my happy ever after. After we got custody of Kelly, we decided that we wanted to build our own house. We didn't pick a plan out of a book and hand it to a contractor and say, do it. The house was 100% built out of love.
But now they have to pay for the mortgage.
Howard had been a long-haul truck driver prior to us getting together years back. So he decided the best way, to make money, he was wanting to drive an 18-wheeler. So Sam and me went in halves and bought an 18-wheeler. We titled it SH&W Trucking, Sam, Howard, and Wilda. We had an operating authority, which meant I could book our loads. I would reach out to different companies to see if they had loads in our area. I did that for several years, and then Howard come across a guy in Brownsville, Texas. Howard started letting this guy book his loads to and from wherever he chose to go. He was making regular trips from Mexico to New York, hauling citrus. When Howard started doing long hauls all the time, wanting to be gone more than he was home, things changed. Family wasn't as important to him as him going and making money or doing whatever he was doing.
In fact, Howard's plans for a nest egg are about to explode spectacularly.
When the police first called me and told me that they had found our truck, It's been abandoned on a side road. It's been here overnight. And they said, who was driving? I said, Howard Willis. He's my husband. Where is he? And they said, the truck's been sitting here. We've not seen anybody. And they wanted to know if I knew where he was. So I'm in shock, not knowing what's going on. I have no way of calling Howard because cell phones in were limited. And they questioned me. I really feel they were trying to see if I knew what was in the truck. My first thing is what happened to my husband? Where's my truck? And where is Howard?
Police in New York State have found S.H. and W.'s 18-wheeler, apparently abandoned, with Howard's whereabouts unknown.
Howard calls me, and he tells me he's at a motel, and I ask him where the truck is. They took it to unload it. I'm waiting on them to bring it back. I called him out on it. I says, no, the police have your truck. And so he starts kind of backpedaling like, the guy picked the truck up. He was supposed to be bringing it back. It should be here any minute. There's no way. So between the police calling and Howard calling, I'm kind of in limbo of who am I believing. Finally, the police asked me if they could search my truck. Of course, you can search my truck.
All Wilda thinks they'll find is citrus fruits, but that's not the case.
Howard hauled approximately 700 kilos of cocaine into the state of New York. That really blew my mind. I was shocked because that's not something I would have ever thought he would have done. Why on earth would you put everything we had at risk for a drug charge?
Knowing he has no option, Howard turns himself in.
And he's charged with one of the largest pure cocaine hauls into the United States. Once we found out there were drugs on the truck, Sam had a hard time believing that Howard didn't know it. What are you doing hauling drugs? What did you get involved in? You are totally against drugs, but yet you're gonna haul cocaine in to the United States that even your own kids could get a hold of. But Howard's able to convince everybody that he wasn't really a part of it and that he don't know what happened. And in all honesty, to think back, he never gave us a satisfactory answer.
Wilda is livid about Howard's situation, but her mother-in-law is even angrier. And she blames Wilda for Howard's arrest.
Betty starts sending death threats to us, start talking about how I'd be shot long range and I'd be chopped up in little pieces where you couldn't identify me. So between the drug charges and Betty threatening us, you know, it's a lot. New York DEA offered a closed deal if he testified and gave names of where the cocaine come from, that he would just receive parole. You give us the information, you get 20 years probation and walk. Howard turned on a gentleman named Kenneth Adams. Supposedly he's the one that actually arranged the deal with Howard to haul the drugs. I believe Sam had the bond posted for him. I think the bond was $200,000. Sam believed in Howard. No matter what Howard did wrong, Sam always looked for the best in Howard.
Sam thought Howard was a good son, but he wasn't. He may have been a good son to his mother. That's another story.
After Howard posts bail and comes home, he realizes his world is kind of closing in on him.
So now the truck is gone, Howard's home. At the time, I'm the only one working. It's wearing on me because I'm doing it all. We're still acting husband and wife to an extent, but there's a great distance between us.
Things really went sour between my mom and Howard when Kelly started going a little teenage crazy.
I know that Wilda had a lot of struggles with her, and I don't think Howard backed Wilda.
In fact, Howard is openly defiant of Wilda and starts acting like a teenager himself. Wilda arrives home from work to discover a surprising scene.
I start coming home with kids in my family room and in my dining room. Boys and girls, sleeping bags, blankets, beds, whatever, you know, just wall to wall with kids. Howard's story was, I'm trying to get along with Kelly. She's a teenager. You know, I'm trying to let her have some space and have her friends over. I questioned him about it, and Howard admitted the kids were drinking. It was very hurtful because that was against everything we believed. I said, that's not appropriate. This doesn't happen again. New Year's Eve, I got off at midnight. My 2 children, they told me Howard and Kelly went out with some of Kelly's friends. So Howard tells me that him and the kids were out later than they meant to, and they had got a room. And so he decided to stay in the motel with, I think there was 8 teenagers at least. I wondered if there was more of a sexual relationship with some of the teenage girls. It's not normal. And it really, that's what broke my marriage. The only choice I could make was for me and Howard to split up and me protect what I had the most, my kids.
Wilda gets an apartment, and she works and takes care of her kids.
I walked away from the house because I knew I couldn't afford the mortgage by myself at that point.
And I do know that she cried a lot. It really broke her heart.
Once I moved out of the house, most of his group moved into the house and was staying there.
But Howard is not working and can't make the mortgage payments. He and the teens are essentially squatters, intent on partying.
It's like he had to be the 16-year-old himself and fit with the 16-year-olds. Kelly had mentioned that her daddy was the one buying the beer. He was the one buying the drugs. And he was letting them use it. He said he would rather them use it at home than be on the streets. Eventually, the bank had foreclosed on the house, so he was forced to move out of the house we had built. Him and the kids all moved to a house in Rossville, late July, 1st of August. So he's living up there with them. He was getting money somehow to pay for their place. I'm assuming Betty was paying for it. In August of 2002, Howard called me. He said, "Oh, I'm just leaving the wedding chapel. Kelly got married and Adam and Samantha got married." And I'm like,
Adam Crismer, Samantha Lemming Crismer, and Kelly's new husband, Brandon, are all 16 and 17-year-olds.
A grown man taking 2 teenaged couples to get married. Why? Why would he do that?
I don't know whether he was trying to keep them under his thumb. That's the only thing I can think of. It was a way to keep them close.
it did appear that Howard controlled these kids. When Howard and me first split up, Sam kind of had faded a little bit out of our life because he thought it was all me. So Sam didn't realize that it was actually Howard encouraging this and it was going on. But Sam himself actually went to the house one day and saw for himself the house was piled up with a bunch of teenagers and Howard. Sam very much voiced his opinion to Howard that he did not approve of it.
This is when Sam finally washes his hands of the stepson he had once doted on.
Sam started coming back around and he had pretty much washed his hands of Howard. Sam was hurt. Kelly was Sam's really first grandchild. Kelly meant everything to him and he, always thought Howard would do right. Howard and me divorced July of 2002. It's about me and my kids now. And them having a relationship with Sam that they still deserve, because that is their grandfather. Sam was very important. I mean, he was there through a lot of things that went on with my grandparents, and then when Howard started having issues, he was there for Howard. And then when Howard and me split up, he was still there for me and my kids, until one day he wasn't. In September, my mom was having to have surgery, so Sam was going to come down and help take care of the cattle. He never showed up, never heard from him.
And that's not Sam. He was always very prompt. If he called and said, I'm going to be there at 9, he's going to be there at 9. Big red flag. Yeah, big red flag. Something wasn't right.
We called periodically on that day, trying to reach him. Hey, give me a call back. So by Monday, after not hearing from him for several days, I decided to drive up there. Howard said he would go with me. It scared me. That was the first time I had honestly been scared to death of what else I was going to learn.
And what Wilda is about to learn will change her life forever.
Something happened in that house.
She was crying, just hysterical crying. And we were like, why would he do that? He's not capable of doing that. There's no way.
Wilda Gadd is concerned when her Uncle Sam Thomas stops answering his phone. Although Wilda and Howard are still estranged, she asks him to come with her to check on Sam.
We walk around the outside of the house. The house is locked, tried to look in the windows. My mom and my uncle, we had all talked, and they said, whatever you have to do, enter the house. So I use a credit card and entered the house.
They found some pamphlets where he had been looking about taking a trip, it looked like.
And then Howard, he goes, oh, I forgot to tell you, Sam told me, the first of the month, he was gonna buy a camper and he was gonna be out of town a while.
Well, Sam didn't never take no trips. Only thing he did was drive a truck. He wasn't taking no trip, vacations. So I believe those were posed.
The overnight bag he always carried, we didn't see it, it was gone. We saw his medicine in the cabinet. He had some high blood pressure and his carotid arteries were partially blocked. So that didn't make sense because Sam took care of himself. So even though the truck's gone, we're still concerned, maybe something's happened. My mom and my uncle drive to Bradley County and file a missing person. And Bradley County told him he was 73 years old, he could go and come as he pleases. Bradley County didn't take us seriously. We're going on a second week and no contact, and that's definitely not Sam.
Now, with more family and Sam's friends from church, Wilda mounts an intensive search.
We walked my uncle's farmland. We weren't even 5 feet apart, we walked it. We searched the chicken houses. There were some small, grain silos. I mean, if we could move it, we moved it and turned it upside down. We searched the house again, where then we found his overnight bag had been stuffed under stuff. So what he normally carried that we thought was gone is there. One of his church members says, hey, that's the wrong chair. That chair belongs there. There's a chair missing.
The chair that was in the house, Sam's had it sitting in a certain spot, and you could see the marks on the carpet, where he had it at. And when we moved it back, and there was a stain on the floor, like a big stain, like a blood stain.
We found a really good picture of Sam and had flyers made up to put on cars or in buildings to look for Sam ourselves.
We had hundreds of flyers made. Going to restaurants, going to stores. We were just basically hoping each day that we'd hear something.
Wilda decides she's gonna call a psychic in. Well, I don't believe in psychics, never have. But he comes in and he tells her that Sam is hunting for his arms. He says he can't find his arms.
Sam's truck's missing. I have a cousin that starts getting on the phone too. She locates Sam's truck at Chattanooga Airport.
But none of the airlines have any record of a Sam Thomas flying anywhere.
So the brochures were in the house and the truck was left at the Chattanooga Airport. We figured that was like a decoy.
One of the family members talked to the parking lot guard, and he said, yeah, I remember when that truck come in. He said a gentleman drove the truck in and he got in a blue Jeep with 2 kids and they drove back out.
More worried than ever, Sam's brother decides to follow the money.
My uncle managed to get a hold of credit card statements, which showed his credit card being used at midnight on the 5th. My uncle contacted the local Walmart, and somehow my uncle managed to review the tapes.
And what they find is devastating in its implications.
They showed Howard and Adam Crismer using my uncle's credit cards.
17-year-old Adam Crismer, one of Howard's entourage, the one who recently married his 16-year-old girlfriend, Samantha.
Finally, the police were in it enough between the tapes and the truck that they were ready to talk to Howard.
The Bradley County Sheriff called him in for an interview on October 4th.
Howard promises to come in and meet.
He did not show up on October 4th. At the last minute, he called and asked for the interview to be moved to October 8th. And in between October 4th and October 8th, a lot of terrible things happened.
A few days later, I get a letter in the mail saying that Adam, and I can't remember, there's several names in the letter, were setting Howard up for murder. And the letter was from Samantha Crismer.
Wilda turns the letter over to the police, and now they take an active interest in Sam's disappearance.
And they wanted to talk to Adam and Samantha both, because it was enough then to know something was wrong.
They can't find Samantha or Adam, but they do find Howard.
He does eventually come into the sheriff's office for the October 8th interview, and he's held.
Howard was being arraigned on federal charges because he was caught using Sam's credit card, so that was a violation of his parole.
Now he is stuck in jail and about to make a bunch of mistakes.
Howard is allowed phone calls, which the authorities monitor. One of the calls is to his mother, Betty.
Betty Willis is talking to him, and they're trying to use code words. And he's saying, you know, you need to move that furniture. She mentions a storage unit. She can't even fully get the sentence out. And he was like, shut up. But she said just enough that the police caught it, and they were like, oh. So the police started calling around different storage units, and they found that Betty Willis had rented a unit in Johnson City, Tennessee. Basically, they could tell from the outside of the storage unit that it was really bad. There is the smell of death.
The Johnson City Sheriff's Office have found human remains in Betty Willis's storage locker, but news of their discovery has been kept from the media. Betty doesn't know, Howard doesn't know, and Wilda doesn't know a thing.
The Johnson City Police Department pretty much told me I had to come up there and talk to them if I wanted not to be associated or involved in what was going on.
The detectives are undecided as to whether Wilda's a possible witness or a suspect, so they tell her as little as possible.
They said, we need you to do us a favor. They fix it where I can go in the jail to see Howard.
Wilda agreed to wear a wire to go visit Howard in jail.
When Wilda tells Howard she's coming, he has a surprising request.
He said, I need you to bring a tape recorder, a notepad, and a pencil. He actually requested himself being taped. I think he figured he could tell me he needed certain things done, and I would have a tape recording of it, and that way I could follow exactly what he wanted done without missing a step.
Howard is unaware that Wilda is cooperating with the police.
So they wire me up. We go over to the jail. I have the wire on. The tape recorder that Howard asked me to bring was turned on. They brought Howard in, and as soon as he hits the door, he says, you're too late. He said, I blew their brains out. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I blew their brains out. And it's not making sense.
The detectives know exactly who Howard is talking about because of what they discovered inside Betty's storage locker.
Okay, this is the entrance, locker number 47. Approaching the locker. This is the raw video, nothing has been removed.
They found two 50-gallon storage containers inside were the bodies of Adam and Samantha Crismer.
Medical cameras people are now removing normal lab. There's definitely this body in the second container as well.
Adam had been dismembered.
There's definitely a body underneath all that.
His head was missing, his hands were missing.
He proceeds to tell me that he shot the kids.
Adam's man, I blew the brains out.
And that he dismembered Adam because that's what Adam did to Sam.
What did you cut? Adam, what did you cut? The dead man.
He said, I know the family would want me to do the same thing to them as they did to Sam.
Detectives know about Adam and Samantha. They've not seen any proof Uncle Sam is dead. Wilda wants to believe he is still alive, but has a sick feeling that he's not.
And so I asked him then to give me details, where I could find Sam's body. And he gives me 4 or 5 locations. But, Howard keeps talking about, don't worry about Sam. Y'all got to help me. They arrested him just minutes later. The police department asked me to make one more phone call that night. We went to a payphone across from the jail, and we called Howard's Aunt Marie Holmes and Betty. They said, let them know what happened. So I tell Marie and Betty that Howard told me that he killed the kids. And the first words out of Marie and Betty is, destroy the tape. Within minutes, Betty and Marie were arrested for asking me to tamper with evidence. I continued to see Howard many times because I wanted to know where to find Sam. Howard was still talking to me, even though he knew that his confession to me got him arrested. Finally, he told me to go back down the road from the fire department, that there would be a mobile home set not way off the road with a carport. Within less than 30 minutes, they had found Sam's body. I called my family so that we could all meet and I could tell them that my uncle was gone. Because we still hoped he was alive.
She told us all that Howard had killed Sam. We couldn't even shed a tear. We were just, no, there's no way. They've got this messed up. There is no way. Howard was out there searching with us. Why would he do that?
After almost a decade of delays, Howard goes to trial for the murders of Adam and Samantha Crismer, the first of his victims to be located.
They played the tape recording that I had made in the jail that night, and within less than 2 days, they came back with a guilty verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Howard Hawk Willis, guilty of first-degree murder.
And he was given a death sentence on both kids.
Howard's death sentence for killing Adam and Samantha means Sam's murder case will probably never go to trial. As for Howard's first wife, Debbie, hers is still officially a missing persons case.
I just couldn't help but think that if we could have brought him to justice earlier, got the investigation concluded on Debbie, 3 people probably alive today. But it never got solved. And so these people had to suffer too.
I think Betty should have been convicted of murder right along beside Howard.
Betty and her sister Marie both die before they can be tried for their involvement. That is, if Betty died.
There was rumors Betty had passed away in a motel in Oklahoma. I honestly don't believe it, Betty died.
She had a lot of police friends and things like that that would help her. Nobody seemed to see her in a casket. Nobody's seen her dead. Nobody.
I couldn't let Howard destroy my life totally. Because then if I did, he won. Once Howard was convicted and sentenced, then it kind of gave me permission to move on with my life. I did marry again, and I love my husband to death today. Yeah, I still deal with the after effects of what Howard did, and after effects of still not knowing the truth about Sam. But I can't dwell on the past. I've got to move on. I've got a family. I've got grandkids. So now we get to spoil our grandkids together. And that's what my life's about now.
The night the town of Red Hollow fell silent was the same night the storm rolled in without warning, scraping across the flat Texas plains like a dark promise no one wanted to face. Lightning split the sky in thin white veins, exposing the lonely highway that cut straight through the heart of this forgotten place. And somewhere along that stretch of asphalt, a story began to take shape, a story that would haunt an entire community for 2 decades. A story people whispered about, but never dared to finish. It started with one girl, one disappearance, and one question that no one could answer. How does someone vanish without leaving a single footprint behind? Her name was Lily Crawford, 17 years old, bright-eyed, the kind of teenager whose laughter filled hallways and hung in the air long after she walked away. The last person anyone expected to end up as the headline of a cold case. Yet, on an ordinary September evening in 2003, she stepped out of her home wearing a denim jacket and holding a paperback novel under her arm, telling her mother she'd be back before the streetlights flickered on. She never returned. What happened between her front porch and the edge of town became the kind of riddle that consumed lives, twisted memories, and tore trust apart thread by thread until the entire community felt as if it had swallowed a shard of glass it could never remove. By morning, Red Hollow was no longer the quiet town tucked away from the world's chaos. Police cruisers lined the dirt roads. Dogs searched the brush. Neighbors formed search parties, and voices echoed through the fields calling Lily's name with a desperation that made the wind hold its breath. But there was nothing. No shoe. No phone. No torn piece of fabric. Nothing to suggest struggle or flight. It was as if the darkness had opened its jaws and swallowed her whole. This was the moment detectives realized they weren't dealing with a runaway or a simple disappearance. This was a cold case in the making, the kind that leaves behind a ghost you can feel but never see. The first days were filled with theories: a stranger passing through town, a secret boyfriend, a planned escape, a kidnapping. But each possibility dissolved under the weight of silence. Lily's mother insisted her daughter wasn't the type to run. Her father, a mechanic, who rarely spoke more than a few words at a time, shattered when detectives asked if Lily had been depressed. She was fine, he repeated, voice trembling. She was fine. But the town wasn't fine. Not anymore. Parents locked their doors. Teenagers stopped walking home alone. People who once trusted their neighbors began to look over fences and wonder what might be hidden in those backyards. Every household carried a private fear. What if the person who took Lily wasn't a stranger? What if they were someone they greeted every Sunday at church? Detective Ron Blake led the investigation, a man known for his methodical patience and for solving cases others gave up on. But Lily's disappearance wrapped around him like smoke, impossible to hold, impossible to follow. He retraced every step she might have taken, but the trail ended in the same place, the darkness between her house and the highway. The case became a maze without an exit, and with every passing day the whispers grew louder. People claimed they saw headlights near the Crawford home that night. Others reported hearing a scream carried by the storm. Someone swore they saw a figure dragging something through the fields, but when questioned again, they changed their story. Fear does funny things to memory. It distorts, it bends, it protects. And Red Hollow was drowning in fear. The investigation expanded. Volunteers on ATVs searched the riverbanks. Helicopters circled the farmlands. Flyers plastered telephone poles. But each effort ended the same way. Nothing. No remains. No belongings. No witness willing to swear to anything on record. Lily wasn't just missing, she had been erased. And with no leads, no suspects, and no demands from a possible kidnapper, the case slowly slid into the shadows, becoming the type of story people avoid saying aloud because speaking it feels like feeding a monster. But that didn't stop the rumors. Rumors became the heartbeat of Red Hollow. Rumors gave people something to cling to when hope began to rot. A year passed, then 2, then 5. Lily's room remained untouched, a shrine of unfinished dreams. Some nights her mother sat on Lily's bed holding that denim jacket and asking the darkness if it remembered anything she didn't. Her father stopped talking altogether, spending most of his days in the garage turning wrenches to drown out the echo of a house that had lost its light. Detective Blake, though retired from the force, kept a box labeled Crawford in his study, a box he couldn't bring himself to close, as if sealing it would be an act of surrender. And every anniversary of Lily's disappearance, the local paper printed the same headline: Texas 2003 cold case, still no answers. Each repetition carved deeper into the town's collective wound, reminding them all that the past was not done with them. But buried beneath 2 decades of silence was something much darker than anyone imagined. a truth hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to crawl out of the shadows. It began with a phone call, a call made in the middle of the night to a sheriff's office 3 counties away. The voice belonged to a man named Joel Raymond, a truck driver. Quiet, unremarkable, the type of man who fades into the background of a gas station or a diner booth without drawing a single glance. His voice trembled as he asked the dispatcher if she believed in guilt. Real guilt. The kind that claws at your ribs every night until you can't sleep. The kind that whispers a name you tried to forget. And then he said it, Lily Crawford. A name that hadn't been spoken outside anniversary memorials in years. A name that sent a ripple of electricity through the sheriff's office. Raymond claimed he had information, something he'd kept hidden for 20 years, something he said would break Red Hollow apart. The dispatcher noted his breathing was uneven, his tone heavy, as if something inside him was unraveling in real time. He refused to say more over the phone. He insisted on speaking in person, demanded confidentiality, and then hung up. Within an hour, deputies were sent to locate him, but when they arrived at the truck stop where the call had been traced, he was gone. His rig was still there, engine-warm driver's door, open keys, dangling lights still on. It looked as if he had stepped out for just a moment, but he never returned. And sitting in the driver's seat was a single envelope with a trembling sentence scrawled across the front, "For the truth to breathe." Inside was a short confession, not complete, not detailed, but enough to turn a 20-year mystery into a living threat. Raymond admitted he had seen Lily the night she disappeared. He claimed he picked her up near the old water tower, crying, shaking, begging not to be taken home. He wrote that she feared someone close. And then his final line, barely legible, cut through the years of silence like a scream trapped in a jar. "I know who took her. I've known all along." The words leaked into Red Hollow like poison. A town that had learned to live with its ghost suddenly found itself unable to breathe. The sheriff's office reopened the case within minutes. Detectives from 3 agencies arrived before sunrise. Lily's name resurfaced not as an old wound, but as a new storm rolling in with the same violence as the night she vanished. A missing girl. A truck driver's confession. A warning that the truth had been living among them this entire time. And somewhere in Red Hollow, someone who thought they had buried the past felt the ground tremble beneath their feet. And as the sun rose over the Texas plains, painting the fields in pale gold, the town realized something chilling. Cold cases don't stay cold forever. Sometimes all it takes is one whispered confession to crack open 20 years of silence and expose the darkness that has been waiting patient and hungry just beneath the surface. The envelope found in the cab of Joel Raymond's truck didn't just reopen a cold case. It ripped a hole straight through the quiet facade Red Hollow had spent 20 years building around itself. By dawn, the sheriff's office was flooded with phone calls, people whispering the same question as if afraid the wind might carry it to the wrong ears. Who was Lily running from? And if Raymond wasn't lying, why had he stayed silent for 2 decades? The weight of that question settled heavily over the town, stretching shadows across every familiar face. Because nothing terrifies a small community more than the possibility that the monster they feared had never left it, had simply adapted, blending into their lives, nodding politely in grocery aisles, shaking hands at Sunday service, pretending to mourn the very girl it took. Detective Marlowe Cade returned to Red Hollow that morning, summoned by the sheriff before rumors could outpace facts. Cade had worked under Detective Blake years ago, shadowing him during the early days of the investigation, absorbing the details of the case until they became scars on his own memory. Walking back into the precinct felt like reopening an old wound he thought had finally closed. The evidence board, rolled into storage over a decade ago, was pulled back out, its faded photos maps and handwritten notes still carrying the stale scent of desperation. And right in the center was Lily's school photo, the corners curling with age, her smile frozen in time, while everyone else had aged without her. Cade's jaw tightened as he stared at the board. "She didn't disappear," he murmured under his breath. "Someone removed her." And now, after 20 years, the first real lead was a confession from a man who had vanished within minutes of giving it. Deputies combed through the truck stop security footage, finding only a few minutes of Raymond pacing beside his rig, rubbing his forehead, as if fighting off something he could no longer contain. Then he walked out of frame and never returned. Investigators searched every inch of the area but found no sign of him, no forced entry, no struggle, nothing indicating he had run or been taken. It was as though he too had been swallowed by the same void that consumed Lily. A second disappearance tied to the same case sent a new chill through Red Hollow, tightening fear around the community's throat like a constrictor. Cade studied the confession, piecing together its meaning with the precision of a surgeon. Raymond claimed Lily was crying when he found her near the water tower, begging not to be taken home. The detail gnawed at Cade's mind. Why would a girl fearful for her life choose to confide in a passing trucker unless she already knew she wouldn't be believed by anyone else? Unless the person she feared had a reputation too clean, too trusted, too woven into the town's fabric for anyone to suspect. The water tower itself became the next focus of investigation. Its rusted frame cast long shadows across the surrounding fields, creaking softly in the wind like an old metal skeleton remembering every secret whispered beneath it. Cade walked the perimeter, scanning for anything out of place. Freshly disturbed soil, scraps of fabric, dropped objects. But the ground was solid, overgrown, untouched by human noise for years. Still, he felt something lingering in the air, an echo of fear that hadn't dissipated with time. She was here, he whispered to himself. She stood right here. She cried here. And someone else knew. Back at the sheriff's office, the first wave of interviews began. People who remembered Lily. People who claimed to have seen something but never spoke up. People who insisted they knew nothing but flinched when questioned about her final hours. Cade listened closely, reading between pauses, watching the way fingers tapped nervously on tabletops, or how eyes flicked toward exit doors. In cold cases, the truth rarely hides behind lies. It hides behind silence. And Red Hollow was a town built on silence. One name surfaced again and again, always spoken in low voices, always followed by a hard swallow: Pastor Graham Ellison. A man beloved in the community, known for his charity work, his calm demeanor, the way he officiated nearly every wedding, funeral, and school ceremony for the better part of 2 decades. Lily had attended youth group sessions he led. She had volunteered at the church food drive just weeks before she vanished. But whenever investigators in 2003 asked about Ellison, townsfolk were quick to shut the door on suspicion. He was the moral backbone of Red Hollow, a man whose kindness had become part of the town's mythology. And yet, Cade kept hearing the same stray remarks spoken reluctantly, as if dragging itself out of people against their will. Lily seemed uneasy around him that summer. Cade pulled Ellison's file thin, almost insultingly clean. No complaints, no red flags, no incidents. Yet something didn't sit right. The timeline placed Ellison within a mile of the disappearance. He had offered to help with the search efforts the next day, even prayed with Lily's parents at their doorstep. But innocence isn't proven by good deeds, Cade reminded himself. Sometimes good deeds are camouflage. Before approaching the pastor, Cade drove to the Crawford home, the house still standing at the edge of town, paint-chipped windows fogged with dust. The front porch sagging under the weight of years that never healed. Lily's mother answered the door slowly, her hair now streaked with gray, her eyes hollowed by 2 decades of waiting. When Cade introduced himself, she stepped aside without a word, as if she had always known this day would come. Inside, everything felt preserved, suspended in time. Family photos lined the mantel. Lily's school awards hung crookedly on the wall. A half-finished puzzle lay on the dining table exactly where she had left it before stepping out that final night. Mrs. Crawford sat down, her hands trembling as she folded them tightly. "Do you believe the confession?" she asked. Cade nodded once. "I believe Raymond knew something. I believe he carried it for years. And I believe Lily was running from someone." Her eyes filled with tears, not the sudden kind that spill all at once, but the slow, painful kind that gather like storm water behind a dam. "She tried to tell me," she said quietly. That summer, she tried. Something about a man who made her uncomfortable. I told her she misunderstood. This town trusts too easily. Do you remember his name? Kate asked, leaning forward. Her silence was the answer. She remembered. She was afraid to say it aloud. Before she could speak, a loud thud rattled the porch outside. Cade stood instantly, hand on his holster, stepping toward the window. A stray branch had smacked against the siding, but for a moment it felt like something else. Someone else. Someone watching. Red Hollow had become a place where every noise sounded like a threat. After calming Mrs. Crawford, Cade drove to the church. Evening light poured through stained glass windows, coloring the pews in shades of crimson and gold. Pastor Ellison stood near the altar, adjusting hymn sheets, preparing for the midweek gathering. When he saw Cade, his face lit up with manufactured warmth. "Detective," he greeted. "It's been years. What brings you back to Red Hollow?" Cade's eyes narrowed. "A confession." The smile faltered. A confession connected to Lily Crawford. He continued watching Ellison closely. The pastor exhaled sharply, clasping his hands together as if preparing for prayer. "Such a tragedy," he murmured. "I still pray for her family, for closure." She was afraid of someone, Cade said. She told at least one person that summer. "We're trying to figure out why." Ellison's eyes flickered briefly, subtly. "Teenagers get scared," he replied. "They misinterpret things. You know how rumors spread." But she wasn't afraid of a rumor, Cade countered. She was afraid of a man. The air tightened. Ellison straightened his posture, narrowing his expression in a way meant to convey patience, understanding, and authority. But Cade saw something else hiding beneath it. A fracture, a momentary shadow. Then the pastor said something unexpected. "You think I had something to do with this?" Cade didn't answer. Silence often reveals more than accusations. Ellison smiled again, too quickly, too rehearsed. "Detective, if you believe the word of a troubled truck driver over a man who has devoted his life to this town, I don't know what to tell you." "But Raymond didn't give us a name," Cade replied. "He gave us a message. And sometimes the guilty are the ones who react before they're accused." Ellison's jaw tensed. The room felt suddenly colder. Before Cade could continue, his phone rang. Sheriff Danner's voice burst through the speaker, urgent, breathless. "We found something. You need to get here now." Cade turned to leave, but as he reached the door, Ellison called out behind him softly, almost gently. "Detective, be careful what stones you overturn. Sometimes you don't like what crawls out." Cade walked out without replying, though his pulse hammered with a new sharp certainty. Someone in Red Hollow was afraid. Someone felt the ground shifting beneath them. And someone wanted the truth buried deeper than ever. Because cold cases don't thaw on their own. Someone had turned up the heat. And Cade could already feel the ice cracking under his boots. The night had settled thick and heavy over Red Hollow by the time Cade reached the sheriff's office, the sky stretching black and endless above the fields like a lid pressed down over something boiling and volatile. He could feel a shift in the air, the same electric tension that precedes a lightning strike. Sheriff Danner met him at the entrance. His face pale, his voice thin with urgency, as he gestured for Cade to follow. The station buzzed with an energy Cade hadn't seen in years. Deputies gathered around desks, radios crackling, papers scattered as if someone had detonated the past and sent fragments flying through the room. Something had happened. Something big, something connected to Lily. Danner led Cade to the back of the station into the evidence room that smelled of dust and forgotten stories. "We found it during a property search," he said, pulling on gloves with a snap that echoed off the metal shelves. "Routine foreclosure inventory. Old farm on County Line Road. Belonged to a man named Earl Hutchkins until last year. He died. No next of kin. The bank sent a crew to clear it out." Cade felt a prickle crawl beneath his skin. "And they found something?" he asked. Danner nodded grimly, reaching into a box and lifting out a sealed plastic evidence bag. Inside was a small denim scrap frayed around the edges, stained by time, but unmistakable in its faded blue color. Cade's heartbeat thudded in his ears. Lily's denim jacket. The one she wore the night she vanished. The one her mother kept describing to police with trembling hands, and a voice that broke each time she reached the sleeves. But the jacket had never been found until now. Where exactly was this? Cade asked, his voice low, steady, but carrying a sharp edge. In a locked trunk in the barn, Danner answered. Hidden under tarps, rusted shut, had to pry it open. Cade examined the scrap through the plastic, feeling the weight of 20 years crushed down on him like a falling beam. This wasn't just evidence. This was Lily's silent scream from 2 decades ago, pushing its way into the light. Does Hutchkins have any connection to Lily? Cade asked. None that we can find, Danner replied. He kept to himself, worked odd jobs, drank hard, stayed off the radar. But that farm is 5 miles from the water tower. Cade's mind raced, and Raymond's confession said he picked her up near the tower. His thoughts sharpened like a blade. This could be where she was taken. Before Danner could respond, another deputy rushed in holding a second evidence bag. Inside was a silver locket, tarnished, dented, but still intact, engraved with a tiny sunflower. Cade recognized it instantly. Lily's favorite. She wore it every day. Her mother had shown Cade a photograph of it 20 years ago, pointing at the delicate chain, as if the universe could be persuaded to give it back. Finding both items together wasn't a coincidence. It was a message buried in the dirt for 2 decades. Someone had kept these things. Someone knew what they meant. Someone hid them because they were proof. Cade inhaled slowly, forcing down a surge of adrenaline. This wasn't Hutchkins, he said. He was a loner, a drifter. But hiding trophies, that's not his pattern. Danner rubbed the back of his neck. Then whose pattern is it? There was only one name Cade didn't want to say, but it echoed through his thoughts anyway. Persistent and cold, Pastor Graham Ellison. A man woven so tightly into the fabric of Red Hollow that removing him might unravel the whole town. But Cade knew better than to trust a clean file or a friendly smile. Darkness doesn't always live in shadows. Sometimes it sits in the front pew. Still, Cade couldn't voice his suspicion yet. Not without more than denim and silver. Not in a town this fragile. Not when fear could cause people to turn on each other like trapped animals. Get a forensic team to the farm, Cade ordered. Top to bottom. Barnhouse, trenches, septic tank, every inch. Someone left traces there, and we're going to find them. Danner nodded and moved quickly, radioing orders, dispatching teams into the night. Cade stepped into the hallway, needing air, needing space, needing a moment to fit puzzle pieces that kept shifting each time he touched them. Lily's jacket. Lily's locket. Stored carefully. Hidden deliberately. This wasn't a random stash. This was preservation. Memory. Obsession. And obsessions have owners? Outside, the night was cool wind rustling across dry grass like whispers trying to warn him. Cade looked out over the lot, eyes scanning the shadows. Red Hollow carried the uneasy stillness of a place holding its breath. Somewhere out there, someone knew exactly what lay beneath the dirt of that farm. Someone who had survived 2 decades without being exposed. Someone who wasn't ready for this case to thaw. Cade felt a presence before he saw it, the sensation of being watched. He turned sharply. Across the street, beneath a flickering street lamp, a figure stood motionless. Too far to identify. Too still to be casual. Cade stepped forward, eyes narrowing. The figure didn't move. Didn't turn. Then the street lamp sputtered, buzzed, and died, swallowing the figure in darkness. When the light flickered on again, the street was empty. Cade clenched his jaw. Someone was already circling him. He returned inside to find Detective Ruiz reviewing the initial documentation of the items found. She looked up with a grim expression. "We have a problem," she said. "The trunk these were found in it wasn't rusted shut like the bank crew said. The rust was old, years old. But the lock, it was replaced recently, within the last 12 months. Cade froze in mid-step, meaning someone accessed it after Hutchkins died. Ruiz nodded, meaning someone went back to that farm. Someone touched that evidence long after Lily disappeared. A chill ran through Cade with needle-point precision. Someone who knew it was there. Someone who didn't want it found. Ruiz leaned closer, or someone who was checking to make sure it was still hidden. They stared at the denim scrap between them, now more sinister than sentimental. The farm wasn't where Lily was taken. It was where pieces of her were stored, a vault of secrets protected by a lock that shouldn't have been touched. Cade felt a clock ticking in the back of his mind, counting down to something he didn't yet understand. While deputies prepped for the search, Cade studied the confession again. One line stood out, vibrating in his thoughts with an ominous hum. "I know who took her. I've known all along." If Raymond truly intended to name the abductor, why leave a partial confession? Why vanish right after unless someone stopped him? Unless the same person who checked the lock on the barn also intercepted him before he could speak. The question wasn't whether Lily had crossed paths with a monster. The question was how that monster managed to stay hidden for 20 years. As Cade sifted through notes, Ruiz approached again, holding a printout. "We pulled Hutchins's old phone records," she said. "Look at this." Cade scanned the sheet. 3 calls stood out, same number placed weeks before Hutchins died. "Whose number is this?" he asked. Ruiz hesitated before answering. "The church office." The words sank into Cade with the weight of a sinking ship. He didn't need to ask who used that office most. He didn't need a diagram or database lookup. The truth was already walking toward him like a shadow pouring across the floor. Pastor Graham Ellison. But Cade refused to jump prematurely. A number was not guilt. A call was not proof. Yet the pattern creeping through the case was unmistakable. People in Red Hollow trusted Ellison, respected him, worshipped alongside him. But that kind of trust is a weapon in the wrong hands. Cade's thoughts were interrupted by another deputy rushing in. "Detective, we got something else from the farm." Cade didn't speak, just followed. In the back of a patrol SUV sat a small wooden box, dusty, weathered, but intact. Inside it lay a stack of Polaroid photos bound with twine. Cade removed them, carefully flipping through each one, and felt the blood drain from his face. The photos showed the barn, the fields, the water tower, all taken at night, all dated the summer of Lily's disappearance. In one, a figure stood beside the tower, blurred, unidentifiable, but tall, lean, wearing a shape of clothing that could be interpreted as clerical, if a mind was already leaning in that direction. In another photo, headlights illuminated the grass near the barn as if someone were documenting their own movements, their own fear, their own obsession. The last photo hit Cade hardest. It showed the denim jacket folded neatly on top of the same trunk where it had been found 2 decades later. Someone photographed the evidence before hiding it. Someone wanted to remember hiding it. Someone kept coming back. As Cade stared at the photographs, an unsettling realization crawled through him. This wasn't just a cold case anymore. This wasn't just a disappearance. This was ritual. This was possession. This was someone feeding on the memory of Lily Crawford for 20 years, returning to the scene like a pilgrim visiting a shrine. And someone like that doesn't stop. They escalate. Cade turned to Ruiz, his voice low but cutting through the night like a blade. "We're not dealing with a ghost," he said. "We're dealing with someone who's been living among us this entire time." Ruiz swallowed. "You think Raymond was going to name him?" "I think Raymond got too close," Cade replied, "and someone made sure he didn't talk." He pocketed the last photo, heart pounding. In Red Hollow, something old was waking up. And Cade knew before this was over, more people might vanish into the dark before the truth stepped fully into the light. The drive to the Hutchins farm felt longer than it should have, the road cutting through empty fields that glimmered under the moonlight like sheets of cold metal. Cade's tires hummed along the asphalt, a steady vibration that matched the pulse pounding beneath his ribs. The discovery of the Polaroids had cracked open something buried deep, and he could feel it now, an invisible current pulling him toward a truth that didn't want to be found. The Texas night was thick, the kind that absorbed sound and held secrets, and as Cade approached the old farm, the silhouette of the barn rose against the horizon like a battered monument to everything this town had tried to forget. Floodlights illuminated the yard, casting harsh white beams across the ground, where forensic teams moved like surgeons in a disaster zone. Officers stepped carefully, marking soil disturbances and cataloging debris. Cade stepped out of his car, and the wind carried a faint metallic scent, rust, old wood, and something else. Something that made the hair along his arms rise in instinctive warning. He walked toward Ruiz, who stood near the barn entrance, arms crossed tightly as if bracing herself against a truth she didn't want to absorb. "We found more," she said, her voice low, pulled taut, inside the barn. Cade followed her inside. The creak of the old wooden door echoed through the structure, bouncing off walls lined with rusted tools, frayed ropes, and dust that fell in soft clouds with every footstep. The air was stagnant thick with the weight of years. The forensic lights cast long shadows that seemed to twist and retreat, as if the barn itself were hiding from what it knew. Near the center of the barn floor, a tarp lay folded back, revealing a square of earth that had been dug up carefully, deliberately. Cade crouched beside it. The ground was disturbed, but empty. Whoever had buried something here had returned to retrieve it. Ruiz exhaled sharply. "We think this is where Hutchkins stored more than just clothing and trinkets. Someone buried something here. Recently." Cade stared at the exposed earth, imagining a pair of hands calm, precise, unearthing whatever secrets they'd planted decades ago. "What was taken?" he asked. "We won't know until we run an analysis," she replied. "But the soil composition indicates something was buried deep. Not large, but significant enough to leave a compression. A body, evidence, personal items." Cade felt his skin prickle. Whoever had come back here had done so with purpose, without panic, without fear of being seen. They had erased something. Erasing requires confidence, familiarity, access. "How did no one see them?" Cade murmured. "This place has been abandoned but not invisible." Ruiz shrugged slightly. "Someone who knows the farm's blind spots. Someone who knows when patrols pass. Someone patient." Patience. Yes. This entire case reeked of a mind willing to wait decades for the truth to rot into silence. Ruiz led him toward the back wall where more evidence markers dotted the floor. Cade saw faint impressions in the dirt, partial boot prints smeared but defined enough to suggest someone had walked through recently. The tread was modern. Not Hutchkins. Not 20 years old. Cade knelt down, studying the pattern. "This brand didn't exist in 2003. Ruiz nodded. "We'll cast it. But this confirms that someone's been coming here. Possibly many times." The idea slithered into Cade's spine like ice. He stood and scanned the barn, imagining a figure standing exactly where he stood now. Someone watching the moonlight seep through the gaps in the boards. Someone cradling a memory like a sacred ritual. Someone whispering to the darkness. Someone who carried Lily's locket in their pocket as if it were a prayer. A deputy approached quickly, breaking Cade's concentration. "Detective, there's something behind the barn you need to see." Cade followed him outside, boots crunching across dry grass. Behind the barn, the ground sloped gently toward an overgrown path. The deputy pointed toward the brush where faint tire tracks cut through the weeds. "These weren't here yesterday," he said. The tracks led away from the property, narrow-spaced closely. A small vehicle, a dirt bike, an ATV. Cade felt a pulse of adrenaline. Whoever had come back to this farm had left in a hurry or had been watching the police arrive and slipped away before being noticed. Cade scanned the horizon, the fields stretching endlessly until they blended into the sky. The emptiness felt alive, as though something were lurking beneath it, waiting for nightfall to shift again. He knew this kind of predator, methodical, patient, deliberate. Someone who rehearsed truths and rewrote lies. Someone whose heart beat only when hidden. "Get a drone up," Cade ordered, "now, and widen patrol radius to 5 miles. As deputies scrambled, Cade's gaze drifted toward the water tower in the distance. It loomed on the horizon like a skeletal guardian of the truth, its rusted legs rooted in soil that had swallowed too many secrets. Lily was last seen near that tower. Raymond had found her there. The Polaroids showed it. Whoever took her returned to the farm later. Every path led back to the tower. The tower wasn't just a landmark, it was a crossroads. Cade's phone buzzed. Unknown caller. He answered. At first nothing, just static, then a breath. Slow, measured. Cade stiffened. Hello, another breath. Then a voice, soft and frayed at the edges like a thread being pulled apart. Detective, you need to stop digging. Cade's pulse surged. Who is this? The voice exhaled again, trembling with a madness beneath the calm. You're waking things that should stay buried. Cade pressed harder. Did you kill Lily Crawford? Silence stretched, thin, taut, dangerous. Then, some stories were never meant to be finished. Click! The line went dead. Cade lowered the phone slowly. His breath came in controlled bursts, each one sharp with purpose. This wasn't a prank. Whoever had called him knew the case, knew the investigation, knew he was at the farm, knew he was close. Ruiz approached, reading his expression. What happened? Cade's voice hardened. He called me. Her eyes widened. Whoever has been here. Cade slipped the phone into his pocket. Whoever took Lily. He's watching us. The words seemed to thicken the air. Deputies nearby instinctively glanced into the fields as if expecting a figure to materialize between the swaying grass. Cade could feel it too. A pair of eyes somewhere observing, calculating, deciding whether Cade was a threat or merely a piece in a game that had been running for years. Then Ruiz asked the question that had begun to burrow into Cade's mind. How did he get your number? Cade didn't answer. The implication was obvious, and it wrapped around him like a dark coil. Someone with access, someone inside the system, someone the town trusted. Cade looked back toward the distant church steeple rising faintly over the horizon. Ellison. Cade wasn't ready to accuse him, not yet, but the shadows around him were thickening, forming shapes that pointed straight at the pastor's gentle smile, his calming voice, his presence at every important moment in this town's history. The calls to Hutchkins, the proximity to Lily, the air of authority that silences victims, and now a mysterious warning. Fear has a signature, and Cade recognized the handwriting. Before he could act, a shout erupted from inside the barn. Detective, we found something. Cade sprinted back inside. The forensic team had uncovered another layer beneath the disturbed soil. This time, a small metal tin corroded but intact. Cade knelt as they opened it carefully. Inside were slips of paper folded tightly. He opened the first, a handwritten note, shaky, childlike. He said I couldn't tell. He said no one would believe me. Cade felt his throat tighten. He opened another slip. I'm scared. I want to go home. Please let me go home. Ruiz covered her mouth. Cade opened the last slip. I saw his face. I know him. He froze. The weight of the words slammed into him with full force. Someone had forced Lily to write these. Or someone had kept her secret notes. Either way, the truth was bleeding through the page. Ruiz whispered, Detective, these are Lily's last words. But Cade wasn't listening anymore. His mind was burning with one realization. These notes weren't buried 20 years ago. They were buried later, much later. Someone had returned to hide Lily's voice. And whoever buried those words was still watching, still waiting, still here. The tin box felt heavier than it should have, its weight pressing into Cade's palms with a cold insistence that made his chest tighten, not just with dread, but with a flicker of something sharper, something like anger catching fire. Lily's notes weren't relics. They weren't remnants buried by time. They were planted, hidden deliberately, hidden recently. Someone had written her terror into the earth again, burying it like a seed they hoped would never sprout. Cade straightened slowly, his breath echoing in the cavernous barn, every creak of the old structure, sounding like a whisper, urging him to move, to run, to keep chasing a truth that snarled back at him from the dark. Ruiz watched him, waiting for his reaction, but the storm in Cade's eyes made her step back slightly. We're sending the notes to handwriting analysts, she said softly. They won't need long, Cade replied, his voice low and tight. We already know they're hers. Ruiz nodded, swallowing. The presses are already asking questions. Sheriff wants to decide how much we reveal. Nothing, Cade snapped. Not yet. The moment this leaks, he'll bury everything again. Or vanish. Just like Raymond. The name lingered in the air, sharp and unwelcome. Raymond. The trucker whose guilt had cracked and oozed through his voice before he disappeared into thin air. Cade felt the pieces sliding into place, not neatly, not comfortably, but with a brutal inevitability that pulled the walls closer around him. A deputy called out from the barn's far corner. Detective Moore over here. Cade and Ruiz crossed the dirt floor, quickly following the beam of a flashlight that shone on a narrow gap between two rotting boards. Inside the gap was something wrapped in stained cloth. Cade pulled it free carefully. When he unwrapped it, the sight drew a hiss from Ruiz. A Bible, Not remarkable at first glance, old leather-frayed spine, but when Cade opened it, several pages had been cut out in the center, leaving a hollowed space where something had once been hidden. Looks like it was used as a hide, Ruiz murmured. Cade flipped through the pages slowly, and on one torn edge he saw faint pencil markings, the ghost of handwriting. Curved, controlled, familiar. A pastor's handwriting. The barn seemed to hold its breath. "We need to talk," Cade said, "now, quietly." He pulled Ruiz aside, away from the ears of deputies and buzzing radios. "This isn't a copy of any Bible Hutchkins would have owned," he whispered. "This style, these margins, this edition, it's identical to the ones Ellison hands out at youth group." Ruiz stared frozen. "You're certain? Positive?" Cade's voice stiffened to steel. "He gave Lily one like this in 03. I remember it from her bedroom." A silence thickened between them, its weight greater than the barn's sagging beams. "Ellison's been close to this from the beginning," Cade continued. "Closer than anyone. Too close." "But proximity isn't proof," Ruiz said, almost pleading, as though she needed the world to make sense again. "No," Cade agreed, "but obsession is." He closed the Bible gently, as though afraid it might bite. "He's not just connected to Lily's disappearance. He's been curating this case, watching it, feeding on it." Ruiz closed her eyes for a moment. "We can't confront him without something concrete." "We'll get something," Cade said. "Tonight." Before she could respond, Cade's phone buzzed again, another unknown number. His pulse jumped. He answered. A voice, trembling but deliberate. "Detective Cade." This wasn't the voice from before. Cade straightened. "Who is this?" A shaky breath. "My name is Anne Grover. I need to talk to you about Lily Crawford." Cade motioned for Ruiz to follow him outside the barn, away from the lights and the crowd. "How do you know Lily?" he asked. Another breath. "I was at the church with her, in youth group. Pastor Ellison." Her voice cracked. "I can't say this over the phone. Please, meet me." "Where?" A pause. "The old playground behind the elementary school. 15 minutes. The line went dead. Cade lowered the phone slowly, jaw set. "She's scared," he said. "And scared people run to the only person they trust." Ruiz frowned. "You think she's in danger?" "I think everyone connected to Lily is in danger." They left immediately, driving through the sleeping town, headlights slicing through the empty streets. Red Hollow looked peaceful, harmless, but the tranquility was just a mask. Beneath it, the town's heart was beating too fast, too hard, as though anticipating something terrible. The elementary school sat at the end of a quiet road, its windows dark, its playground bathed in pale moonlight. Swings creaked softly in the breeze. Cade and Ruiz stepped onto the gravel eyes, scanning. Near the jungle gym, a figure paced back and forth, a thin woman in her 30s, arms wrapped tightly around her chest, hair pulled into a trembling ponytail. Anne Grover. She startled when she saw Cade, then rushed toward him, voice shaking. "You have to listen to me. I've been trying to forget for 20 years, but now the police are everywhere, and the news. God, the news, it's coming back." "Tell me," Cade urged gently. "Start from the beginning." Anne hugged herself tighter, as though bracing against a memory colder than the night air. "It was the summer before Lily disappeared," she said. "Pastor Ellison ran a special study group, said it was for kids who needed guidance. Lily joined. I joined. A few others." Her breath hitched, and she looked toward the shadows as if expecting someone to emerge. "Ellison paid special attention to Lily," she whispered. "Too much attention. He'd give her rides home, private meetings in his office. He said she needed spiritual correction." Cade felt his stomach twist. "One day, Lily fought with him. I saw it. She stormed out of the church crying, saying she wasn't going back, that she didn't want to be alone with him anymore." Ruiz leaned in. "Did she say why?" Anne's eyes filled with guilt. "She told me he touched her hair, her shoulders, said things that sounded wrong. She tried to tell the youth coordinator, but Ellison talked to her first. After that, Lily wouldn't speak about it again." Her voice cracked. "And then she was gone." Cade felt the air sharpen. "Why didn't you say this back then?" Anne backed up, shaking. "Because Ellison is powerful here. Everyone listens to him. My parents told me I misunderstood, that he was a man of God." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "They made me apologize to him. He smiled when I did. A smile I never forgot." She swallowed hard. He watched Lily the whole summer, like he was waiting. The words hit Cade like a blow, and that's not all Anne whispered. 2 days before Lily disappeared, she came to my house. She was terrified. She said she saw Ellison watching her from his car. She said she was going to tell someone, anyone. She said she couldn't stay quiet anymore. Cade's pulse roared in his ears. Then she vanished, Anne finished weakly, and I knew he did something to her. A cold gust swept across the playground, rattling the chains on the swings. Cade drew in a slow breath. Everything was pointing to Ellison not as a suspect, but as a quiet, patient predator whose power stemmed not from physical strength, but from trust, from reputation, from the way an entire town bowed its head when he spoke. Ruiz asked carefully, "Why come forward now?" Anne hesitated. Then her voice dropped to a trembling whisper. "Because someone has been sitting outside my house at night." Cade's chest tightened. "Describe the vehicle." "A sedan. Dark, no lights, just watching." Ruiz exchanged a sharp look with Cade. "Ellison drives a dark sedan," she murmured. "I don't know if it's him," Anne said. "But yesterday, there was a note on my porch." She reached into her pocket and handed Cade a slip of paper. A single line was written in neat, careful handwriting. "Some memories can ruin lives." Cade felt the playground tilt slightly beneath him. "Anne, you need protection. We'll escort you to the station." But Anne stepped back, shaking her head fiercely. "No. If he finds out I talked." A rustle tore through the bushes behind them. Cade spun hand on his weapon. Silence. Too much silence. Then a single movement, a shadow sliding away, dissolving into the darkness. Ruiz whispered, "He's here." Anne clapped her hands over her mouth to stifle a sob. Cade scanned the tree line, his pulse pounding hard enough to shake him. Whoever stood out there wasn't running. They were watching, studying, deciding. Cade stepped forward, raising his voice just enough to carry into the dark. "Pastor Ellison." No answer. But Cade knew. He felt it in the cold breeze that shifted suddenly, in the oppressive stillness settling around them, in the invisible gaze burning into his back. He knew. This wasn't the kind of man who fled. This was the kind of man who waited. And somewhere in the dark, the man who had held an entire town in his grip for 20 years was smiling. The shadows around the playground thickened as if absorbing the breath of everyone standing there, and Cade could feel the weight of eyes retreating into the tree-line eyes that had watched him, Ruiz and Anne, long before any of them stepped foot onto the gravel. He kept his hand on his weapon, scanning the darkness, but whoever lurked there had already dissolved into the night, melting into the kind of silence that only the guilty know how to use. The wind cut colder now, pulling at Cade's collar, tugging at Anne's trembling frame, as if urging them to leave before the night swallowed them whole. "Anne," Cade said carefully, guiding her toward the car, "we're not staying here. You're coming with us. You'll be safe at the station." "No," Anne whispered, voice cracking. "Safe isn't real anymore. Not here. Not anywhere he can reach." Cade lowered his voice. "You're safer with us than alone. Whoever left that note isn't finished. And whoever followed you here knows you talked." Ruiz stepped closer, her tone gentle but firm. "Anne, you've been carrying this alone for 20 years. Let us take some of the weight." Anne hesitated, eyes darting across the shadows. Then she nodded, almost imperceptibly. Cade opened the back door of the car, helping her inside. The moment the doors shut, an uneasy quiet settled over the playground. The swings creaked again, but this time the sound felt deliberate, as if mocking them. Cade stood still for a long moment, staring into the tree line. "He was here," Ruiz murmured beside him. "Yes," Cade said, "and he wanted us to know." They got into the car and drove toward the station. The headlights cut through the darkness, slicing across houses with shuttered windows and empty porches. Red Hollow wasn't asleep. It was hiding. Cade knew the difference. A sleeping town breathes slowly, peacefully. A hiding town holds its breath, listening for footsteps in the dark. As they drove, Anne kept her gaze fixed on the scenery passing by, flinching at every shadow, every passing car, every sway of tree branches. Trauma carved grooves into a person's mind that no amount of time could erase. She had carried this fear from childhood into adulthood, and now forced to speak it aloud, the memories had sharpened again, raw enough to bleed. "You didn't tell me everything," Cade said quietly. Eyes on the road. "Something else happened that summer." Anne's grip tightened on her sleeves. I couldn't say it out there. Not where he might still hear. You think he was listening? Anne's voice trembled. He always listens. Ruiz turned slightly. Anne, what did he do to Lily? Anne stared ahead, her eyes glassy. He took something from her. Something she couldn't get back. And she tried to fight him. She inhaled shakily. When Lily told me she was going to tell someone, she said she'd written everything down. Every detail. Every moment. She said if anything happened to her, those notes would prove the truth. Cade's hands tightened on the wheel. Notes. Yes, Anne said, pages from a journal. Ruiz's voice sharpened. Do you know where she kept them? Anne swallowed hard. She said she hid them in her jacket lining. Cade's pulse spiked. The denim scrap. The locket. The tin box. The notes buried in the barn notes planted years after 2003. The journal pages were missing. Removed. Hidden. Or destroyed. Anne Cade said slowly, did Lily ever give those notes to anyone? A long pause stretched suffocating. Then Anne whispered, she gave them to Pastor Ellison. She said she wanted him to understand why she felt unsafe. She trusted him. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She didn't know he was the one she should fear. Ruiz let out a quiet, horrified breath. Cade felt something cold and ruthless coil inside him. Ellison had taken the journal. Ellison had killed her voice before killing her. The pieces snapped into place not neatly but violently, each fragment stabbing a clearer picture into Cade's mind. The Bible with pages carved out. The Polaroids. The revisited burial site. The lock replaced on the trunk. The calls to Hutchkins. Raymond's sudden confession and disappearance. The dark sedan outside Anne's house. The figure in the woods. Ellison was everywhere and nowhere, a ghost with a pulse, a man whose influence stretched like a web across Red Hollow. They reached the station where Sheriff Danner waited with a face carved from granite. He stepped forward as Cade and Ruiz escorted Anne inside. Who's this? Danner asked. A witness, Cade said. And she's staying under protective custody. Danner nodded and signaled for a deputy to lead Anne to a secure interview room. When she was out of earshot, Danner turned back to Cade. Everything all right? You look like you've seen the devil. Cade's eyes hardened. I think we have. Ruiz filled him in, quickly summarizing Anne's testimony. Danner listened, jaw tightening with each sentence. When she finished, Danner rubbed his forehead. Ellison has been in this community forever. He knows everyone. Has keys to every home for hospital visits. Charity runs prayer circles. He exhaled sharply. If he's our guy, he could have covered this up from every angle. He did cover it up, Cade said. He manipulated everyone around him, used trust like a shield. And when Lily tried to expose him, Cade's voice darkened. He silenced her. Danner paced for a moment. We can't bring him in. Not yet. If we tip him off. He already knows, Cade interrupted. The moment we found the jacket scrap, he felt the ground shift. He's 3 steps ahead of us. Ruiz added. And he's watching. He followed Anne. He was at the playground. Danner froze. You saw him. Didn't need to, Cade said. He left a shadow. A deputy rushed in, then breathless. Sheriff Detective, there's something you need to see. They followed him to the front desk where a brown paper envelope sat as if it belonged there, innocuous and silent. Who dropped this? Danner asked sharply. The desk sergeant shook her head. We didn't see. Looked like it came through the door slot. Cade picked it up, turning it slowly. No name, no markings. He opened it. Inside was a single Polaroid of Cade, standing at the playground, taken less than an hour ago. Ruiz sucked in a breath. He's taunting us. Cade stared at the photo, his own silhouette, Ruiz behind him, Anne in the background, the timestamp printed along the bottom edge. Cade's blood ran cold. Ellison hadn't just been watching. He'd been close enough to touch them. Danner swore under his breath. Cade slipped the Polaroid into an evidence sleeve, though he already knew what it meant. Control. Dominance. A message carved into the bones of the investigation. I am always there. I see you before you see me, and you are already too late. Cade exhaled slowly. We need eyes on Ellison. Now. If he's planning anything. But before he could finish, the station lights flickered briefly. Then another deputy burst inside, panic etched into his face. Sheriff, it's the church. Someone broke in. Danner spun. What? It's a mess, papers everywhere, office drawers torn open like someone was searching for something. Cade didn't wait for permission. Let's move. Within minutes, the patrol cars carved through the dark, sirens muted to avoid alerting anyone lurking nearby. The church rose ahead, its silhouette trembling under flashing lights from the deputies' vehicles. The entrance door hung ajar. Shards of glass glittered across the steps. Cade approached, first gun drawn, Ruiz at his side. Inside, the air smelled of paper dust, splintered wood, and something faintly chemical like the residue of a candle snuffed out abruptly. The main hall was untouched. But Ellison's office? It looked as though the storm had passed through. Drawers, emptied books pulled off shelves, papers shredded underfoot. Cade sifted through the debris, recognizing forms, letters, church records. What was he looking for? Ruiz asked. Cade didn't answer because something had snagged his attention. A small locked drawer pulled from the desk, abandoned on the floor, its lock pried open. Inside were 2 items, a set of old keys, and a torn piece of notebook paper. Cade lifted the paper carefully. A single line was written in Lily's handwriting. He said he'd follow me forever. Ruiz whispered, "Oh my God." But Cade's focus snapped to the keys. One key in particular, a long rusted one with a notched end. Ruiz noticed his stare. What is that? Cade felt his lungs tighten. A padlock key. For the trunk, Ruiz whispered. Cade nodded slowly. This key, this exact key, opens the trunk in the Hutchkins barn. Silence crashed into the room. Then Ruiz said the thing they were both thinking. That means Ellison had the trunk key the whole time. Cade closed his eyes briefly. No more theories. No more shadows. No more doubt. Pastor Graham Ellison wasn't just a suspect. He wasn't just a predator. He was the architect of the entire nightmare. And now, somewhere in the night, the man who had stolen Lily Crawford's last summer was loose. And he knew they were coming. The keys lay in Cade's palm like pieces of a confession the suspect never intended to speak, each one cold, with a kind of quiet arrogance, as if Ellison believed that even if someone found them, they'd never see the shape of the truth hiding beneath their rusted edges. Cade closed his fingers around them, feeling the sharp metal press into his skin. He welcomed the sting. It cut through the fog of adrenaline and carved the moment into something real, undeniable, irreversible. The room around him still trembled from the chaos Ellison had left behind. The shredded papers, the overturned drawers, the faint smell of cologne lingering in the air, like a mocking reminder that the man they were hunting had stood here not long ago, close enough to sift through his own lies before discarding whatever no longer served him. Ruiz moved carefully through the office, her flashlight sweeping across the floor. He was looking for something, she murmured. Something he thought we were close to finding. Cade nodded slowly, or something he thought Anne still knew. Her jaw tightened. If he thinks she remembers more than she told us, he may go after her. Cade didn't need to finish the sentence. Ruiz already understood. Vulnerability was a predator's favorite doorway. Ellison had used fear to keep Anne silent for 20 years. Now that she had broken that silence, she was more exposed than ever. Danner stepped into the office, face drawn tight with the kind of tension that comes when belief collapses under evidence. He looked around at the destruction, then at the keys in Cade's hand. You think these prove he had access to Hutchins's barn? They don't prove it, Cade replied. They scream it. Danner blew out a long, slow breath. God help us. Ellison's been a fixture here for decades. Baptisms, weddings, funerals. He's counseled half this town. And manipulated the other half, Cade said. That's why he stayed hidden so long. He's a dangerous man, Ruiz added, the kind who uses trust as a weapon. Danner scrubbed a hand across his face. We have enough to bring him in. No, Cade said sharply, stepping forward. Not yet. Both Danner and Ruiz stared at him. If we go in loud, Cade continued, he'll find a way to twist it. He'll claim we're hunting him. He'll use his followers. He'll turn it into persecution. And without Lily's journal, without something concrete tying him to her last hours, he'll walk. Cade's voice lowered, steady and cold. We need him cornered, not confronted. Ruiz nodded slowly. We need the journal. Danner couldn't argue. The journal was the missing heart of the case. Lily's own testimony, written in her handwriting, the truth he had stolen from her and buried deeper than any shallow grave. Cade pocketed the keys. We find where he hid it. We find what he took from the barn. We find everything he didn't want uncovered. Ruiz exhaled. We start at his house. The drive to the parsonage felt like descending into the center of a storm that had been forming for 2 decades. The clouds above seemed thicker now, roiling with a darkness that mirrored the unease swelling inside Cade's chest. Every instinct in him screamed that Ellison was moving fast, smart, and with the kind of precision only someone who had rehearsed deceit for years could execute. When they pulled up, the house was dark, the porch empty, the curtains drawn tight. No lights, no movement, not even the hum of a television through the walls. It was a silence so deliberate it felt staged, as if Ellison had arranged the entire house as a message to them. "You're late. You should have come sooner. Now try to catch me." Cade approached the door, slowly testing the handle. Locked. Ruiz moved around the perimeter, checking windows. Danner circled back, shaking his head. No sign of him. Cade stepped back, scanning the house, noticing details he hadn't. Before 2 sets of footprints in the dirt near the side gate, a faint indentation where a vehicle might have been parked recently. "He's gone," Cade said softly, and he left in a hurry. Inside the house mirrored the chaos at the church. Papers scattered. A lamp knocked over, cabinets left open. But there was something restrained about the mess, as if Ellison had destroyed only what mattered to him, leaving everything else untouched. Ruiz sifted through stacks of books, glancing up. He didn't take much. He took what he cared about, Cade corrected, or what he feared we'd find. They moved toward this bedroom. Cade opened the closet and stilled. Inside were clothes arranged with meticulous precision hangers, evenly spaced. Everything ironed the wardrobe of a man who curated his image as carefully as he curated his lies. But at the bottom of the closet was a locked wooden box. Cade knelt, inserting the trunk key. It fit. The lock clicked open. Inside lay a collection of items: old photographs, sermon drafts, postcards, and a velvet pouch that made Cade's stomach twist. He opened the pouch. Another locket. But this one wasn't Lily's. It belonged to another girl, one Cade didn't recognize. Ruiz's face drained of color. Oh no. Cade sifted deeper. A bracelet, a hair bow, a torn corner of a photograph showing a child's face. Souvenirs. Ellison hadn't just taken Lily. He had taken others. Silent, unseen, unreported. Creatures like Ellison thrive on patterns, small, chilling rites that become habit. He hid pieces of them in the sanctuary of his own home trophies, arranged like a private liturgy. "There could be more victims," Ruiz whispered. "My God, how many more?" Cade didn't answer. Because there were no answers yet, only horrors. Suddenly, Ruiz's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and her expression froze. "Cade, it's Anne." The tremor in her voice said everything. Cade took the phone. "Anne, are you safe?" But it wasn't Anne's voice. It was a man's. Soft, measured, poisonous. "Detective Cade." Cade's blood iced over. "Ellison." Ruiz grabbed his arm, eyes wide. Cade forced his voice into stone. "Where is she?" A low hum of amusement crackled through the receiver. "You shouldn't have pushed her to speak. Some truths are dangerous." "Ellison, if you hurt her, you misunderstand." Ellison sighed as though disappointed in a child. "I protect this town. I protect the lost. I protect the weak. Lily needed guidance. Anne needs guidance. You, detective, you need restraint." Cade's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. "Where is she?" A beat. Then the sound of a car engine idling. A faint muffled whimper in the background. Ellison inhaled slowly, theatrically, letting the silence draw tight as a noose. "I'll give you a chance, detective," he murmured. "Since you seem to enjoy chasing shadows. If you want Anne back, find the place where she and Lily used to sit. The place where innocence ends." The line went dead. Cade felt the world tilt. Ruiz steadied herself against the dresser, breath sharp and fast. Danner swore under his breath, already calling dispatch. Cade didn't wait. He ran out the door, heart slamming against his ribs. He knew exactly where Ellison meant. The river overlook, where the children of Red Hollow used to sit on summer afternoons, where Lily and Anne spent countless hours away from their homes, where Ellison had first approached them. The overlook was a forgotten edge of town, isolated, quiet, shrouded by trees that leaned over the cliffside like sentinels guarding an old wound. Cade's tires screamed against the asphalt as he tore toward the overlook, Ruiz and Danner close behind. The darkness outside felt alive, crawling across the landscape with intent. They reached the path. Cade jumped out before the car stopped moving. He sprinted down the trail branches, clawing at his jacket, the distant rush of water growing louder with each step. Then he saw it, a single figure kneeling near the cliff edge. Anne, her hands bound, her mouth taped, her eyes wild with terror, and behind her, Ellison, calm, still, smiling. As if this were nothing more than another sermon. Cade stopped, breath burning in his throat. Ellison raised one hand in greeting, the motion gentle, almost pastoral. "Detective," he said softly, "you made good time." Ruiz and Danner arrived, weapons drawn. Ellison didn't flinch. Instead, he placed one hand on Anne's shoulder. She whimpered, shaking uncontrollably. "Step away from her," Cade growled. Ellison sighed. "You still don't understand. Lily ran because she was frightened of the truth she carried. Anne ran because she was never strong enough to hear it. And you run because you need a villain to fight." He tilted his head slightly, eyes shining with something unhinged. "But villains and heroes, Detective, they're just reflections in different mirrors." Cade took a step forward. Ellison tightened his grip on Anne. One wrong move and she could fall. The river was 50 feet below, cold, roaring, merciless. "Let her go," Cade said. Ellison smiled, soft and eerie. "Let her go. I've been holding her fear for 20 years. I've been holding all of you." He looked at Cade with unsettling affection. "Do you understand what it means to be the shepherd of a frightened flock?" Cade didn't blink. "You're not a shepherd. You're a coward." Something flickered in Ellison's eyes. Not anger, amusement. He leaned close to Anne and whispered something Cade couldn't hear. Anne's eyes widened, tears streaming down her cheeks. Then Ellison spoke louder, projecting his words into the night. "Detective Cade, what if the truth you're chasing isn't the truth at all?" Cade froze. Ellison continued, voice drifting across the overlook like smoke. "What if the person you truly seek is already dead?" For the first time, a crack of uncertainty rattled Cade. Ellison saw it and smiled wider. A smile that said, "You don't know the full story. You never did. And you're already too late." Then Ellison leaned back and pushed Anne toward the cliff. The world seemed to rip in half the moment Ellison's hand left Anne's shoulder, and her body lurched backward toward the edge, time slowing into a series of shattered frames that Cade would replay in his mind long after the night was over. Her scream never fully formed, just a strangled gasp torn from her throat as her feet slipped on loose gravel and she pitched toward the dark void silhouette framed against the roaring river below like a question mark thrown off a cliff. Cade didn't think. Instinct shoved reason aside. His legs moved on their own, propelling him forward in a desperate sprint, boots skidding as stones scattered out into the night. Ruiz shouted something behind him. Danner yelled his name, but their voices were distant, hollow, drowned beneath the thunder in his ears as he lunged for what little remained between life and nothingness. His fingers caught her wrist at the very last second. Momentum nearly dragged them both over the edge, gravel tearing under his boots as his body pitched dangerously forward. For one dizzying heartbeat, the world tilted, and all he could see was the violent churn of water far below, a black maw waiting to swallow them whole. Anne's full weight yanked down on his arm, pain flaring through his shoulder like fire. She dangled over the drop feet, flailing for purchase that wasn't there. Eyes wide and frantic, a muffled scream trapped behind the strip of tape pressed over her mouth. Cade dropped to his knees, then onto his stomach, fingers digging into the dirt with his free hand, every muscle in his body straining as gravity tried to claim them both. "Got you," he grunted through clenched teeth. "I've got you. Don't let go." Ruiz slid beside him, grabbing Anne's other arm. Danner planted his boots and seized Cade's belt, anchoring him as the cliff crumbled in small, betraying slides under their weight. For a terrifying moment, nothing felt stable, just hands clutching hands in a chain above a drop that didn't forgive mistakes. Cade could feel Anne shaking, the tremor of pure animal terror radiating up through her bones into his. He dug his fingers in deeper skin, scraping raw, refusing to loosen his grip, even as pain roared through his shoulder like a siren. "On 3, Ruiz hissed. 1, 2, 3. They pulled with everything they had. Muscles, screaming tendons, burning the earth beneath them, groaning as if deciding whether to hold or give way. Inch by inch, Anne's body rose, sneakers scraping, rock knees knocking painfully against the edge. With a final heave, they dragged her back onto solid ground. Cade rolled away, chest-heaving, lungs greedy for air that tasted like dirt and adrenaline. Anne lay on her side, sobbing behind the tape fingers, clawing into the earth, as if to reassure herself it was real that she was still here. Still anchored, not a sound, swallowed by the river. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The night itself seemed stunned, caught off guard by the fact that death had been cheated, if only by inches. Then Ruiz ripped the tape from Anne's mouth. She gasped, sucking in air, her voice breaking into hysterical sobs that sliced through the silence like glass. "He was going to kill me," she choked. "He was going to push me, like he pushed." She stopped herself, words strangling suddenly as if they were too dangerous to say aloud. Cade's pulse surged. Like he pushed who? Her eyes locked with his desperation flooding them. "Lily," she whispered. "He said he gave her a choice. And when she refused, he shoved her. Just like he tried to do to me." The river roared below, a brutal, unending echo of that confession. Cade forced himself back to his knees, scanning the overlook. The spot where Ellison had stood was now empty. Only disturbed gravel remained, footprints overlapping in a chaotic scramble that led away into the trees. No figure, no shadow, nothing but absence shaped like the man they needed most. "He's gone," Ruiz muttered, breathing hard fury, flashing like lightning behind her eyes. Danner swore, already shouting into his radio, dispatching units to block the access roads to check every route out of town. But Cade knew. Ellison was too careful to be trapped by obvious nets. The moment he'd chosen this place, this bluff, this stage for his twisted performance, he must have mapped every escape route in his head. This wasn't a panic move. It was scripted, rehearsed, controlled, like every sermon he'd ever delivered. Cade walked to the edge of the cliff, staring down into the dark, listening to the river gnash its teeth against rock. Somewhere in this town, there was a memory of Lily's final sound. The rush of air, the snap of impact, the invisible splash of a life cut short. Ellison had carried that memory alone for 20 years and used it as both shield and weapon. Tonight, he'd almost added another. "He's not afraid to kill again," Cade said, voice low but steady, words rolling out like a verdict. "He never was." He turned back to Anne. She sat hunched over, arms hugging her knees to her chest, shoulders shaking. Ruiz draped a jacket over her. Anne, Cade said gently, crouching beside her. "What did he say to you before he pushed you?" She swallowed, throat working with effort. He said some stories only make sense when you know the ending." Her eyes shone with tears and terror. "He told me the town was happier not knowing, that Lily's death saved them from something worse." Cade's jaw clenched. Saved them from what? "He didn't say," she whispered. "He just smiled and said Detective Cade will learn eventually that you can't save everyone. Some lives are better erased." The words sank like stones into Cade's chest, heavy and vile. Erased. That was what Ellison had tried to do to Lily, erase her truth, her voice, her accusations. He had used faith and fear to strip her of credibility. And when that wasn't enough, he stripped her of breath. Behind them, sirens began to wail in the distance, the sound approaching like a chorus of alarm. "We need to get you back to the station," Cade said to Anne. "Somewhere secure, somewhere he can't reach you." She shook her head weakly. "He can reach anywhere. You don't know him like I do." Cade looked her in the eye. "You're wrong. I know exactly what he is now." They escorted her back up the trail, each step away from the cliff feeling like a step deeper into a maze Ellison had designed. Cade's phone buzzed again as they reached the cars. Ruiz glanced at the caller ID and her features hardened. "Anonymous tip line," she muttered. "We've had 3 calls in the last 20 minutes. People are saying they saw Ellison's car near the old industrial park. Others say they saw him near the river bridge. He's everywhere and nowhere." "He's stirring the town," Cade said. "He wants chaos. Confusion buys him time." Danner caught Cade's arm. "We can issue an arrest warrant now. Kidnapping attempt. Suspicion of homicide. We have enough." Cade nodded once. "Do it." And put his face on every screen, every bulletin, every doorway. I want Red Hollow to see the man they've been kneeling in front of for 20 years. But even as he agreed, he knew Ellison had anticipated this too. The man hadn't made it 20 years by underestimating how investigations unfolded. If his mask was going to be ripped off, he'd already decided what face he wanted them to see beneath it. Back at the station, the atmosphere had changed. The normal hum of routine was gone, replaced with a crackling tension. Deputies moved with urgent purpose. Phones rang off the hook monitors, flickered with traffic cams, surveillance feeds, and a slowly populating wanted alert bearing Ellison's photo. The headline crawled across the local news ticker within the hour. Texas 2003 cold case explodes beloved pastor named prime suspect. Why not solved? Cade knew the media would chase that word eventually. But right now, the town didn't have closure. It had shock. In the chaos, the community's faith was fracturing. Some called in furious, insisting Ellison was innocent, that this was a witch hunt, that the police had become drunk on rumors. Others whispered that they had always found him unsettling, but never dared say it aloud. A few admitted quietly, fearfully, that their children had once confided discomfort around him. Regret dripped from every late confession like poison. Cade watched the storm unfold from the operations room. Ruiz stood beside him, arms crossed, eyes scanning the incoming reports. Anne sat in a secured interview room, watched by two deputies, a blanket around her shoulders like a fragile shield. She flinched every time a door opened, half expecting Ellison to walk through. "We've got patrols at every exit," Ruiz reported. "Airport flagged. Bus station covered. State police notified. If he tries to leave, we'll know." Cade shook his head slowly. "He won't leave." Ruiz frowned. "You really think he'll stay in Red Hollow after this?" "He's not done," Cade said. "He thinks this story still belongs to him. He's not going to walk away before he writes the final line." "And what's that supposed to be?" Cade's gaze shifted toward the evidence board, Lily's photo in the center. The denim scrap. The Polaroids. The Bible. The notes from the tin. The trunk key. Anne's testimony scribbled along the margins like bloodstains. "He still thinks he controls how this ends," Cade murmured. "Predators like him don't accept narratives they didn't design." A younger deputy burst into the room. Face flushed. "Detective Sheriff, you need to see this." They followed him to the front desk where a television broadcast played on mute. The station's anchor wore the strained expression of someone tasked with delivering news that would split the town in half. Beneath her, the Chiron read exclusive recording leaked in Red Hollow cold case. The deputy turned up the volume. The screen cut to a grainy video recorded on a phone. Ellison sat in what looked like a dim office, possibly filmed earlier that day, maybe earlier that week. He faced the camera with calm eyes, voice steady, composed. "If you are seeing this," he began, "then the town I love has been led astray." Cade's stomach knotted. "This community has been my home, my calling, my responsibility," Ellison continued. "For years, I have watched it suffer under the weight of a tragedy none of us understood: Lily Crawford's disappearance. I have prayed for answers. I have begged for peace. But now the enemy has arrived in the form of men who seek to dishonor what we built, men like Detective Cade, who would rather blame a shepherd than seek the true wolf." Ruiz swore under her breath. Ellison leaned closer to the camera, eyes gleaming with calculated emotion. "I am not a perfect man. I have made mistakes. I have failed people. But I did not harm Lily. I tried to save her. I tried to save others. When no one else would listen to the broken, the damaged, the confused, I listened. And now my compassion has been twisted into accusation." He exhaled slowly, theatrically. "Ask yourselves who benefits from dragging a pastor through the mud, who profits from resurrecting an old ghost to haunt Red Hollow again. The truth is being buried beneath their need for a headline." Cade's teeth ground together. He knew exactly what Ellison was doing, seeding doubt, drawing a line down the town's spine, daring people to pick a side. The recording wasn't over. One day, Ellison added softly, "The real story of what happened to Lily will come to light. And when it does, you will see that I was not the danger. I was the warning. I was the only one who knew what she was running from." The screen froze on his face, eyes calm, mouth faintly turned in a martyr's half smile. The anchor's voice returned, explaining that the video had been emailed anonymously to multiple residents. Danner killed the volume. For a moment, the room was quiet. Then the noise started to creep back in. Phones ringing louder, deputies muttering chaos building. Ruiz looked at Cade. He's trying to flip the script. Cade nodded slowly. He just told the whole town there's more to Lily's story than anyone knows. Ruiz exhaled. You think he's bluffing? Cade stared at Lily's photo, feeling the pull of something just out of reach. No, he said softly. I think he still has one last secret, and whatever it is, he's going to use it as his final weapon. Because cold cases don't just break open. Sometimes they explode. And Red Hollow was standing on a fault line it didn't know existed, waiting for the next tremor to tear it apart. The video didn't end when the screen froze on Ellison's face. It lingered in the room, saturating the air like a toxin, seeping into every corner of the station, until even people who knew better began to shift uneasily, as if some small part of them wanted to cling to the illusion that their pastor couldn't be what the evidence said he was. That's what predators like Ellison counted on, more than anything, the human desire to believe in a good story over an ugly truth. Cade watched deputies exchange glances, read the conflict in their eyes, the push and pull between memory and fact, between sermons and Polaroids, between the man they thought they knew and the monster he'd shown himself to be. The town was splitting, and Ellison had drawn the line exactly where he wanted it, through the center of their faith. Cade turned away from the television and faced the evidence board again, letting the noise of the station dissolve into a muffled hum behind him. Lily's eyes stared back from the center of the board forever, 17 forever, frozen in that one photo version of herself that the world had turned into a symbol. She deserved more than this circus, more than Ellison's performance, more than a case file stuffed with gaps. She deserved the one thing nobody had been able to give her for 20 years, the full truth. Play it again, Cade said quietly. Ruiz frowned. The video, why, we already know what he's doing. Not the message, Cade replied. The background. The tech rewound the clip, and Ellison's face reappeared on the screen, eyes calm, posture composed. Cade stepped closer, studying the frame. The lighting was low, but not random. A lamp glowed to Ellison's left, throwing a soft halo along one side of his face, leaving the other in shadow. Behind him, shelves, dark wood, books, a cross on the wall. It looked like his office, but Cade's mind tugged on a small thread that didn't fit. Freeze it, he said. The tech paused the frame on Ellison's shoulder. Cade narrowed his eyes. Zoom in on the background, right there, top shelf. The image pixelated slightly as the camera pushed in, but some shapes remained clear. Stacked books, a metal box, a frame, a small ceramic angel. Cade focused on the metal box, a familiar size, familiar shape. Back it up, he murmured. Another shelf came into view. Cade's breath caught. There, blurred but unmistakable, sat a Bible with a hollowed center, same style, same edition as the one they'd found in the barn. Next to it, a small tin box identical to the one unearthed from the soil. The same kinds of containers Ellison had used before. But the decor was wrong for his church office. The wall behind him wasn't the soft beige of the church interior. It was darker, lined with old paneling. That's not his office, Ruiz said quietly. No, Cade agreed. It's somewhere he thinks looks like his office. Somewhere he spends enough time to recreate his little empire. Like a backup pulpit, Ruiz muttered. A place no one else knows about. Not no one, Cade said. Hutchkins knew. Raymond knew. Maybe Lily knew. He replayed Ellison's last line in his head. I was the only one who knew what she was running from. Ellison loved double meanings. Every word was chosen to do two things at once, mislead the audience and signal something to himself. Cade turned to the tech. Check the video metadata. Where was this recorded from? The tech shook his head. Stripped. Whoever uploaded it wiped location tags. No GPS, no device ID. Of course he did. Ellison would never leave an easy breadcrumb. But he had left something else, and Cade felt it like a distant radio signal. Dark wood paneling. Bookshelves that didn't match the church. A lamp with a stained glass shade shaped like a small chapel. Cade's mind flashed back through everything he'd seen since arriving in Red Hollow. Every hallway, every storage room, every forgotten building at the town's edge. A place where Ellison could talk to himself and pretend the town was listening. The retreat house, Cade said suddenly. Ruiz turned. What? The old church retreat house out by Dry Creek, Cade said. It was used in the 90s for youth weekends and prayer groups. Shut down about 10 years ago. Still owned by the church. Ellison has keys. His voice tightened, and it has dark wood paneling matching shelves and a room that looks exactly like this frame if you squint. Danner didn't hesitate. Let's go. But Cade grabbed his arm. Not with sirens, he said. Not with lights. Ellison knows how we move. He heard them at the Overlook. He watched them outside his house. If he's at the retreat house, he'll bolt the second he hears us coming. We can't just stroll in, Danner replied. We don't, Cade said. We walk in like we're going to service. Minutes later, they left without fanfare 2 unmarked cars. No radio chatter, just a quiet gravity pulling them toward the outskirts of town. The night had deepened, clouds thickening overhead, pressing low like a lid. Cade drove with his headlights dimmed, letting the memory of the retreat center rise in his mind, a narrow gravel drive. A small wooden sign half swallowed by weeds, a 2-story lodge with a wraparound porch, and windows that always looked empty even when filled with people. They turned off the main road and onto the gravel, the crunch under the tires loud in the silence. No other vehicles, no lights, no sign of movement. But the hairs along Cade's arms stood up all the same. They parked out of sight behind a stand of trees. Cade and Ruiz moved forward on foot, weapons holstered but ready. Danner circled wide to cover the back. Up close, the retreat house looked like a relic, abandoned by time, paint-peeling porch boards, warped the wooden cross over the entrance tilted slightly to one side. But the lock on the front door told a different story. It was new. Recently replaced. Unweathered. He's using this place, Ruiz whispered. Cade tried the handle, locked. He slid one of Ellison's keys into the slot. It turned. The door creaked open, exhaling the stale smell of dust-old wood and something else, candle wax maybe, or the faint sourness of sweat in a room where people had been sitting for hours. They stepped inside. The lobby was empty, lined with old couches and faded inspirational posters. Scripture verses curled at the edges, corners browned. The quiet was dense, the kind that felt less like absence and more like someone holding their breath. Cade motioned forward. Down the hall, a faint glow seeped from beneath a closed door. The same kind of light in Ellison's video. They moved silently, boots soft on the worn floorboards. The closer they got, the clearer the details became, low voices, a subtle hum, maybe a recording, maybe live. Cade reached the door and pressed his ear against it. A voice spoke on the other side, not Ellison's. Lily's. Cade's heart slammed once hard. He recognized the cadence from the notes, the phrasing from her mother's stories, the way she clipped certain consonants. Except this Lily sounded alive, scared, shaken, but alive. I don't want to be here. Her voice trembled through the wood. Please, I just want to go home. Ruiz's hand flew to her mouth. It wasn't a ghost. It was a recording. Cade's fingers shook as he gripped the handle. He counted silently, 1, 2, 3, and threw the door open. The room inside looked exactly like the frame from the video, dark wood paneling, bookshelf-lined wall, a small cross hanging just above a lamp with a stained glass shade. In the center of the room sat an old cassette tape recorder on a desk, its reels turning slowly, exhaling Lily's voice into the room, as if the walls had been feeding on it for 20 years. No Ellison, no movement, just the ghost of a moment he had preserved for himself. On the shelves, more boxes, more tins, more hollowed books, a private museum of fear and control. Cade crossed the room in 3 strides and slammed the stop button on the recorder. The tape whined to a halt, Lily's unfinished sentence cut off mid-plea. His hands hovered over the device, the reality of what it was sinking into his bones. Ellison had kept her, not her body, her voice. He had replayed it, over and over, a trophy that spoke, a confession he owned, a story only he was allowed to hear to the end. Ruiz moved numbly toward the shelves, scanning the spines, the labels. Cade, she whispered. They're numbered. On the shelf were rows of cassettes, each with a date scrawled on the label. Some from 2003, others from years before, others from after. Next to them, a smaller row of digital drives, each tagged with a single word: session, confession, guidance. Cade pulled one tape from the row. A different name was written on it. Not Lily's. Another girl, another year. The scope of Ellison's crimes widened in an instant, a yawning chasm beneath their feet. This isn't just about Lily, Ruiz said hoarsely. He's been doing this for decades. Before Cade could respond, a floorboard creaked above them. Not the house settling. A footstep. They froze. Slowly, Cade lifted his gaze to the ceiling. Another creak. Same spot. Someone was moving overhead. Danner's voice crackled softly in Cade's earpiece. Back entrance is clear. No visual on him. You inside? Cade spoke under his breath. He's here, upstairs. Ruiz's eyes burned with a hard, focused intensity. Then this is where it ends. They moved toward the staircase at the far end of the hall, each step deliberate, controlled. The house seemed to inhale around them, the walls holding secrets so tightly they creaked. Cade placed his hand on the rail, feeling the vibrations of the footfalls above, measured unhurried, as if whoever was up there wasn't running. He was waiting. They reached the top of the stairs and stepped into a narrow hallway. Doors lined each side, most closed, one half open at the far end, a sliver of light leaking out. Cade motioned for Ruiz to cover the right while he took the left, inching forward until they reached the final door. The light spilling from inside was warm, almost inviting, like the glow of a living room lamp at the end of a long day. Cade drew in a slow breath. He pushed the door. Inside was a small attic-like room with a slanted ceiling and a single desk placed beneath the window. On the walls hung photographs. Groups of children at youth retreats, smiling families at church events, community gatherings in front of the very building they now stood in. The desk chair was empty, but on the desk lay a single object. A journal, faded blue cover, edges frayed. Cade recognized it from the description Lily's mother had given him years ago. Lily's journal. He approached cautiously, every instinct screaming trap, trap, trap. Ruiz scanned the corners, the closet, the window gun sweeping each angle. No Ellison, just the journal, and on top of it a folded note with his name on it. Detective Cade. Cade picked it up, unfolding it slowly. A single sentence stared back at him in Ellison's careful handwriting. You wanted the truth. Read it. Then decide who you're really hunting. The journal sat beneath his fingertips, humming with the weight of everything Lily had been denied the chance to say out loud. Cade closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. He knew one thing for certain. Once he opened that cover, nothing about Red Hollow, about Lily, about Ellison, about this entire town would ever look the same again. And somewhere beyond these walls, in the dark fields and back roads of Texas, Graham Ellison was moving one step ahead, already shaping the next headline. Texas 2003 cold case solved, hidden Confession Rock small town. But whose confession and whose truth? The answer was waiting between those pages. And the clock that had started the night Lily Crawford disappeared was finally violently running out of time. The journal felt small in Cade's hands, too small for something that had carried 20 years of weight in its silence. Its faded blue cover soft at the corners from being held thumbed, clutched by a girl who had been trying to turn fear into words. The attic room seemed to narrow around him as he stood over the desk, the slanted ceiling lowering like a held breath. Ruiz hovered near the door, gun still drawn, eyes sweeping the room, even though they both knew Ellison was gone. Predators don't leave their trophies behind unless they're done with them, or unless they want someone else to find them. The note with his name on it lay open beside the journal, Ellison's neat handwriting still glinting in Cade's mind. You wanted the truth. Read it. Then decide who you're really hunting. It wasn't just a taunt. It was a dare. Ellison was betting that whatever sat waiting between those covers would twist the investigation into a shape Cade hadn't prepared for. Cade opened the journal. The first page was ordinary. Date. A quick note about school. About a math test. About how her English teacher talked too much. Her handwriting looped and tilted the ink faint in places where the pen had started to run dry. A 17-year-old girl trying to make sense of a small Texas town and the life she'd been given. It could have been anybody's notebook. For a moment, it almost felt cruel to drag her back into the light like this. Then he remembered the tin box in the barn. the Bible with the hollowed center, the tape recorder downstairs, replaying her fear on a loop for Ellison's private enjoyment. He kept reading. The pages shifted quickly from mundane to heavier. Complaints about feeling watched, notes about insomnia, lines that began as fragments of prayers and ended as jagged questions. What does God do with people He doesn't want anymore? How do you tell the truth when the truth makes everyone hate you? Some entries span a full page. Others stop mid-sentence as if she had been interrupted or couldn't bring herself to finish the thought. Then one entry landed like a fist. I hate my house. I hate that I can't lock my door and feel safe. I hate that the person everyone says loves me makes my skin crawl. Cade felt his stomach tighten. Ruiz glanced at him, reading the shift in his face. What is it, she asked. He didn't answer. Not yet. He turned the page. She never writes his name at first. Just him. He. The one who smells like grease and cigarettes. The one who sits on the edge of the bed too long. The one who gets angry if I pull away. Words dance around the reality, hovering at its edges the way victims often do when their own mind rebels against the label. Then finally, she writes it down in letters that dig into the page hard enough to leave indentations. My dad. Cade exhaled, one slow, steady jaw tightening. The attic suddenly felt colder, the old boards beneath his feet less stable. He thought of the man standing in that living room 20 years earlier, arms hanging limp, voice cracking as he said, "She was fine. She was fine. She was fine," as if repeating it enough times might make it true. He thought of the silence that had swallowed their house after the search had ended, the way her father had retreated into the garage, the town chalking it up to grief. Grief, or guilt. Ruiz's voice came softer. Cade. He kept reading. Lily writes about the first time she tried to tell someone. Not a cop, not a teacher, the youth coordinator at church. She writes about the way her words stuck in her throat, how she half said things, half swallowed them. How the coordinator's eyes had gone wide, then nervous, then apologetic, as she suggested they bring it to Pastor Ellison. He'll know what to do. He'll know how to help. He did know what to do, just not the way they thought. The next entry drips with confusion. She describes sitting in Ellison's office, the same kind of room Cade had just walked through downstairs. How he leaned forward and told her she was brave for speaking. How he said God trusted her with heavy truths. How he asked questions gently at first, then more pointed, more intimate. What exactly did your father do? Where how many times did anyone else ever see? Did you ever tell him no? Did you ever let him? Cade could feel his hands clenching around the journal. Lily writes about leaving that office feeling both lighter and dirtier, as if she had handed over something sacred and had it examined under a spotlight. She writes that Ellison promised he'd handle it, that he would confront her father, protect her, guide her. She writes that she believed him because everyone did. Because when you've never been believed, you cling to the first hand that reaches back. Then something shifts. The handwriting grows messier. The spacing between lines shrinks, words crowding together, bumping shoulders like people trying to force themselves into a small room. He talked to my dad, she writes. I know he did because my dad looked at me different at dinner. Not shocked, not ashamed, amused. He didn't yell, he smirked. He said, "You've been talking to the pastor a lot." Then he said, "Some stories will ruin your whole life if you don't keep them where they belong." After that, the tone of the entries grows fractured. She writes about Ellison avoiding her for a while, then calling her back in for check-ins. She describes how those meetings changed. Less about what her father did, more about what she wore, where she went, who she talked to, how sinful thoughts contaminate the soul, how women seduce without realizing it, how sometimes good men are led into temptation by confused girls. Ruiz whispered he blamed her. Cade's voice came out flat. Of course he did. Some entries are furious, scrawled in capital letters, the ink smeared by what look like tears. She writes about wanting to burn the whole church down, about hating God, about wondering if maybe she deserved what happened because no one seemed to think it was wrong enough to stop. Then the journal jumps. Weeks disappear. Maybe she was too tired to write. Maybe she was afraid someone would find it. When the words return, they carry a new weapon resolve. She writes about documenting everything: dates, times, words said, where people stood, who was in the room. She begins to write like someone building a case. If anything happens to me, she writes, this is my confession. Not that I sinned, that I refused to keep their sins a secret. Cade's chest tightened. This wasn't just a diary. It was evidence. Lily describes seeking out Joel Raymond at the truck stop. Not by accident. Not as some random ride. She writes that she had noticed his rig for months, always parked at the same spot, always there late at night, when she walked past the edge of town to escape the house. She writes that he once returned her dropped backpack and didn't ask questions, just nodded, just said, "You okay, kid?" in a way that made her feel like maybe someone saw her without wanting anything in return. She writes that she decided if Ellison failed her, she'd ask the trucker for help. Ask him to drive her to the sheriff, or out of town, or anywhere that wasn't here. But when she finally told Ellison her plan, he didn't react the way she'd hoped. He told her she was overreacting, that involving the law would destroy her family, that accusing a man like her father would tear the town apart, that people would call her a liar, that she would regret speaking. He told her she was thinking like a child, not like a woman of faith. Then his words grew sharper. He suggested that running to strangers, men only proved she was lost and vulnerable to corruption. He painted himself as the only safe harbor. The more she wrote, the clearer his pattern became. Isolate, confuse, invert victim and villain, make himself the sole gatekeeper of salvation. Then came the entry dated the night before she disappeared. Ellison asked me to meet him tomorrow, she writes. Not at the church, at the retreat house. Says he has a plan. Says he talked to my dad. Says there's a way to heal this without dragging everyone through the mud. I don't trust him. I can't. But I feel like I'm caught between two fires, and he's the only one holding water, even if I know it might be gasoline. She writes that she also plans a backup. If it feels wrong, if he tries to silence her, she'll walk out. She'll go to the water tower. She'll wait there. She'll wave down Raymond's truck. She'll leave Red Hollow behind and start telling the story somewhere people don't know her father's name. Then the last full entry. The ink darker as if she pressed harder to force the words into permanence. I am not crazy. I am not a liar. If this notebook is found without me, don't let them say I made it up. Don't let them turn me into a lesson in obedience. My dad hurt me. Pastor Ellison knew and did nothing. Worse than nothing. He used it. He told me sometimes sacrifice is necessary to keep peace. He said if I truly loved this town, I'd stop talking. I think he's more afraid of the truth than my dad is. She underlines the next sentence 3 times. If I disappear, it was because one of them decided their peace was worth more than my life. Underneath the writing trails off into a short fragment, the letters jagged. I'm going to meet him anyway because I'm tired of being afraid of everyone and everything. But part of me thinks one of them is going to kill me. Cade stared at the page for a long time, the attic spinning just slightly as if the house itself recoiled from the force of the accusation. Both of them, Ruiz whispered. Her father and Ellison. 2 men everyone trusted, 2 predators circling the same girl. Cade turned the page. There was one more line, dated the same day. The handwriting less deliberate, as if written in haste, as if she'd already been halfway out the door when she came back to scratch it down. If they say I ran away, they're lying. Then nothing. Blank pages. Cade closed the journal slowly, feeling the weight of it settle into his bones. Lily hadn't just named her abuser. She had named the collusion, her father's crimes, Ellison's manipulation, the cowardice of everyone who chose comfort over confrontation. This was the hidden confession. The one the town never heard, the one Ellison had stolen, and kept the one he had dared Cade to read. He thought of her mother sitting in that faded living room holding her daughter's denim jacket like a relic and whispering that she tried to tell me. He thought of the father silent in the garage, letting the town see his grief but never his guilt. He thought of Ellison, hand on Anne's shoulder, pushing her toward the same edge he'd pushed Lily off, confident they'd all believe his version of events again. What happens when this gets out? Ruiz asked quietly. When the town reads this, Cade's voice was rough. Everything breaks. Because this wasn't just about one girl anymore. It was about a system of trust that had been weaponized. Fathers, pastors, institutions. The people kids are told to run toward when they're afraid. Lily had run toward all of them and found only different shapes of the same darkness. His radio crackled suddenly, cutting through the attic's hush. Detective Cade, a deputy's voice came through tight with urgency. You're going to want to hear this. We've extended the search downriver from the overlook. We found something. Cade closed his eyes briefly. Say it, he said. A partial skeleton, sir. Female, caught in a rock shelf. Clothing remnants matched the Crawford description. We're roping it off now. For a moment, all he heard was the river roaring in his memory. The distant echo of Anne saying he pushed her like he pushed Lily. The body, the journal, the tapes, the trunk. For 20 years, Lily had been somewhere in that water, while her voice sat on a shelf in this hidden room, replayed by the man who put her there. Secure the scene, Cade said. No media, no one in or out unless I say so. Yes, sir. The radio clicked off. Ruiz's face had gone pale. We can finally bring her home, she said. At least, that. Not yet, Cade replied quietly. Not until we put her story back together. All of it. Not the version her father told. Not the sermon Ellison tried to preach over her. Hers. He picked up the journal and slipped it into an evidence bag with a care that bordered on reverence. This wasn't just another piece of the puzzle. This was the center. The blueprint. The truth that everyone had refused to look at because it required them to admit they'd been living in a house with rotting beams. As they left the retreat house, Cade's phone buzzed again. Unknown number, he answered. Detective Ellison's voice drifted down the line, soft and almost amused, like a man checking in on a student after an exam. Did you enjoy her diary? Cade's grip tightened on the phone. You're done hiding, he said. We found the journal. We found the tapes. We found where you threw her. A low chuckle slid through the speaker. You found what I left you. That's not the same thing as finding me. You killed her, Cade said. I helped her. Ellison replied calmly. You'll understand that when you read the last pages. Did you get to the part about her father? About what she was planning? I know what he did, Cade snapped. You knew too. You didn't stop him. Did you? Ellison's voice sharpened suddenly. You knocked on his door, you looked him in the eye, you left, you went home. How many chances at salvation do you think a girl like Lily gets in a town like this? Detective, her father hurt her. The law failed her. The church twisted her. This place was never going to let her walk away alive with that truth. Cade said nothing. Ellison's tone softened again, sliding back into that practiced pastoral calm. You think catching me solves this? You think putting handcuffs on a pastor erases the rest? No, I'm just the headline. The real story is much uglier, and if you print it, you'll burn Red Hollow down. I'm not here to protect the town, Cade said. I'm here to finish what she started. A beat of silence. Then Ellison almost sighed. Then let me give you a gift. A final confession, since you like them so much. The line crackled. Cade waited. In 20 minutes, Ellison said softly, go to the place where she wrote her first entry about me. Come alone. Bring the journal. If you want the whole truth, the truth even Lily didn't know, you'll come. If you don't, I'll tell my story without you. And trust me, detective, this town is much better at believing me than believing dead girls. The call clicked off. Cade stared at the dark screen, the reflection of his own eyes hollowed by sleepless nights and old failures. What did he say? Ruiz demanded. Cade slid the phone into his pocket, the journal heavy under his arm, the river roaring in his memory. Lily's words echoing through his head like a siren. He wants to talk, Cade said. He wants to write the last line himself. He stepped into the night, the air thick, the distant lights of Red Hollow flickering like a town standing on the edge of its own confession. Somewhere out there, the man who built an entire life on other people's silence was waiting. And Cade knew with a clarity that cut straight to the bone that the next conversation they had wouldn't just decide how this cold case ended. It would decide what kind of town Red Hollow was willing to admit it had been all along. You wanted the truth, Ellison had written. Part of Cade wished just for a heartbeat that he hadn't. Because the truth wasn't just going to solve the case. It was going to tear everything else apart. The sanctuary felt wrong at night. Cade had been in enough churches after dark to know that silence in a place built for worship sounded different from silence in a house or a street. But Red Hollow's church didn't just feel quiet, it felt complicit. The stained glass windows were black mirrors now reflecting only the faint glow of the parking lot lights and his own silhouette moving down the aisle. Every pew he passed held ghosts, faces that had bowed their heads while Ellison spoke hands that had clapped for him. Mouths that had said amen to sermons about truth and repentance, while Lily's journal lay hidden in a lockbox, her body broken on the rocks below the overlook, her voice trapped on tapes in a secret room outside town. He had given Ruiz and Danner the story Ellison wanted and the one he didn't. He asked me to come alone, Cade had said. So I will. But you'll be outside. No sirens, no lights. No one comes in unless I call it. They had argued, of course. They knew how men like Ellison ended things dramatically, theatrically, with blood or fire, if they could manage it. But they'd listened, because they knew Cade was right about one thing. This wasn't just an arrest. It was a reckoning. And sometimes, reckoning didn't arrive in handcuffs. Sometimes it arrived in the dark on a wooden bench with two men and the truth sitting between them like an open wound. He walked toward the left side of the sanctuary, counting rows. The journal had done more than name names. It had mapped the inside of Lily's life. One entry had burned itself into his head as soon as he read it. Sitting in the third pew on the left while he talks about forgiveness, and I'm writing about the way his eyes stay on me too long. I don't think God hears me in here. I think only he does. That was the place Ellison meant. Not his office. Not the retreat house. The first pew where she'd turned him from pastor into a sentence on paper. Cade slid into the third pew on the left, placing the journal beside him. The wood creaked softly under his weight. The pulpit loomed ahead empty, bathed in a strip of moonlight cutting through the high window. The air smelled faintly of old hymnals wax and something else, something clinical like antiseptic trying to scrub away rot. You're early, a voice murmured behind him. Cade didn't turn. No, he said. You're late. Ellison stepped into his peripheral vision, emerging from the side aisle as if he'd always been there, part of the architecture. No clerical collar tonight. Just a dark shirt, dark slack sleeves rolled neatly above his wrists. He looked almost casual, except for the tension coiled subtly in his shoulders, in the way his eyes flicked once toward the entrance before settling back on Cade. He walked down the aisle with the same measured gait he used on Sundays as if he were about to deliver another sermon. Instead of climbing the steps to the pulpit, he stopped at the end of the pew and looked down at the journal. So he said softly, She finally got an audience. Cade kept his gaze steady. You left it where I'd find it. I did, Ellison agreed almost pleasantly. I was tired of being the only one who had to carry it. You didn't carry it, Cade said. You fed on it. Ellison's mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile. You see monsters. I see burdens. People bring them to me, detective. I don't go hunting for them. Her father came first, you know, long before Lily walked into my office. He came in smelling of guilt, asking how much sin a man could commit and still be forgiven. Men like that never ask about petty things. Men who are afraid God doesn't want them anymore are never worried about cheating on their taxes. Her father raped her, Cade said flatly. You knew that. You had more power than anyone in this town to stop him. Instead, you gave her theology and told her to quiet down. Ellison tilted his head, his eyes glinting in the dim light. Is that what the journal says? That's what your tapes say. He chuckled softly. You found those too. Good. It would have been a shame for all that fear to go to waste. The words were so casual, so offhand, that for a moment Cade's breath caught not from shock, but from the confirmation of something he'd suspected from the moment he'd heard Lily's voice on that cassette. Ellison didn't just use confession to control people. He enjoyed it. There was a satisfaction in his cadence, a pride in having curated all those private breakdowns. You're done talking around it, Cade said. You hurt her. You helped her father keep hurting her. And when she refused to stay quiet, you took her to the overlook and pushed her into the river. You tried to do the same thing to Anne. That's what this is. You getting one last